Religion, government, or national security? Brannon brings the issues of the day into clear focus through the lens of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
And welcome to the broadcast. On this Thursday night, April 16th, 2026, joining me in studio, as they did on radio and television today at 1 o'clock Central, is Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner. As you know, they are the authors of this book, The Final Betrayal, a cautionary tale, how technocracy destroyed America. Patrick Wood is the author of a brand new book. I received a not-for-sale copy today, but you can get the real copy at Amazon.com or technocracy.news. It's called The New Economics of Technocracy. You will own nothing. And we're going to take a lot of your questions tonight. A lot of you have already emailed in questions, and we're going to talk about tokenization, central bank digital currencies. They're setting up little 15-minute freedom cities, if you will, some of them being set up around the eschatology and the theology of even religious groups, Reconstructionist, Dominionist. You might find that interesting. I guess we don't have to have a civil war. We could just let people divide up and go live where they want and create their own little community. Let's see how that works out. I don't know. How about banks? Are any of the banks pushing back against this tokenization idea? You know, a year or two ago, we were talking about all the federal legislation being proposed that would really put the Federal Reserve in control, and everybody would have a Federal Reserve bank account, a Federal Reserve wallet. Remember when that was being talked about during the Biden years? And we showed you the PDFs on this, and we talked about how basically your local bank will become paper pushers for the Federal Reserve. So if you want to go in and get a home loan or a car loan, you go in and you fill out the paperwork, and the local bank, well, they want to stay around and be the paper pushers for the Fed. They can do that, and you can get a loan through the Federal Reserve. That was being proposed. Everybody having what was called a Fed Now. Remember that? Fed Now. And these wallets that were being created. Well, is that being disrupted by Donald Trump? Is there something else that's going to happen now? That was kind of during the Biden years. What about now? We'll talk about the new plan, because Trump is coming in and seemingly upsetting the whole plan and implementing a whole brand new one. Let's talk about that, along with how are some of the banks, as I said, the smaller, more medium-sized banks, are they going to join some of us freedom fighters in opposing this system? Did you ever think you might find yourself working alongside some of the banks for your liberty and freedom? You know? Hard times and difficult times sometimes make for strange partners, don't they? Let's get into all that tonight with Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner. Guys, thanks for staying over today and being on TV tonight.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Sure. Glad to have you here. Let's pick up where we left off today on radio. And we started with that. And we ran out of time. The computer took it away. We had to go. You were saying that, first of all, let me reset the question. Remember during the Biden regime, we were looking at all these PDFs and everything, talking about a Fed Now, and everybody was going to get their own Fed wallet, right? And the Federal Reserve was going to kind of replace our local banks. Remember that?
That's right.
Yeah.
Has Trump disrupted that whole plan?
Temporarily.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
What's it going to be replaced with?
A privatized system that he has erected in its place based on, well, things like
USD1.
Tokens based on treasury bills, treasury bonds, and is
So
all
basically cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And you mentioned USD1, which is the Trump family's.
Yeah.
World Liberty Financial.
That's
and
their
they call it the
cryptocurrency.
truth dollar.
That's theirs, right?
Yeah.
That's
the
right.
family started that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they created the structure, the regulatory structure, almost out of thin air. It's amazing how fast it got erected. Trump signed a bunch of executive orders, and then he got Congress to pass the Genius Act and the big, beautiful bill, whatever it was, has lots of stuff.
One big, beautiful bill.
I know, right? And so all of a sudden, what happened at the last end of the year, these new privatized systems were operational at that point, and based on this you can't do this without regulations. You understand? They had to do
Infrastructure.
that. And so they had the structure. They just did it. But what happened, in my opinion, what happened was when Trump signed the executive order to waive the Fed away from research on central bank digital currencies, the Fed was only concerned about payment tokens. That there's nothing else in view other than payment tokens. Okay, well, what was in there, the Trump administration's mind was, no, that's not enough. We have to have asset tokens as well, operating aside with the payment tokens, right? So they constructed a regulatory system that accommodates both sides of that platform, payment tokens and asset tokens. And this is why Larry Fink said, for instance, just recently, everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized. And so these asset tokens are going to basically take the value out of almost anything they touch, like real estate, the forest, the oil, the mineral rights, etc. Anytime tokenization touches an asset, a real world asset, they call it. This was the big picture, if you will, that this was what was in their mind in the first place to create this structure. So all of a sudden, last month, we saw that Trump's World Liberty Financial Company, only concerned about payment tokens in the first place, but now all of a sudden they just announced, well, we're going to have an asset tokenization division, and we're going to start tokenizing that asset.
So Trump's own company is jumping on board with that.
Exactly.
I think that was the plan all along. But
with Gaza in view.
Right, with Gaza in view, which we saw in their plan, that Jared Kushner and all of them are behind. What do you think about this? What do you want to add to it, Courtney?
We were saying before, because I was trying to give a little bit of hope. I know this doesn't sound super hopeful, but just a little glimmer is that there is some pushback. And, earlier I had brought up the example of the natural asset companies, which I do believe this is like the 2.0 iteration of the NAC. So the natural asset companies, they were trying to partner up with the New York Stock Exchange. They did rescind it. It didn't go through, but they thought they were going to make upwards of $500 quadrillion, and they're not going to just leave that on the table. So I think this lines up exactly with the same kind of plan to be able to capture and commodify all the world's resources and put this up on a digital ledger where they have complete control, and control is the operative word.
Okay,
right?
so this is where you then start tying in social credit scores.
Yes,
and really
and programmable.
Basically, programmable. The money will expire if you don't spend it within 30 days or 90 days or whatever. And of course, you can keep the economy rolling by getting everybody to go spend because your token's are about to expire.
Yes.
So you can really have a planned economy, right?
Yes, it's a planned economy. But the hope that the people, we did get them to rescind that proposal. So people do have some agency. We do have some power. You can push back, in some cases slow down some plans. So I just don't want people to feel completely powerless. That's why we bring the information, is so people can hopefully do something about it. But the other thing is that when you were talking about the unlikely partners, so when the bankers. So when we were writing this, of course we were talking about the Genius Act, which had already been signed, and the Clarity Act was not far behind, the Stable Act also. But what we didn't know at the time was that the Clarity Act actually was originally inside the Genius Act. The reason they separated and pulled it out was because the banks pushed back, and they couldn't get the Genius Act signed without the Clarity Act being outside of it. They couldn't, with it in it, they couldn't get it signed. And so they took it out. But now, of course, I do think the Clarity Act will get signed, but they've tried again, and the people who pushed back were the banks. And the reason the banks are pushing back is they stand to be definitely lose money, but they also stand to be completely wiped out.
Yeah, just become irrelevant, right?
I would.
And replaced by a federal system, as I was talking. So everything, you want a car loan, a house loan, you go right to the federal government.
Yeah. But it's also all the interest, right? All that time where things get transacted, they collect money on all those transactions, and they collect money on the interest and the time things sit. Things take a long time to move with banks. They're faster than they used to be, and a lot of the system is somewhat digitized, but it still takes a while to clear. Whereas with these tokens, it's instant. So they're not collecting any interest on any of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, at this point, mathematically speaking, the banks are on a death watch.
Yeah.
And there's just a matter of time where they'll all be wiped out, the smaller ones especially, savings and loan as well.
Savings and loan as well.
Well, it's all based on the debt-based system. That they make their money loaning money and charging fees against the transactions. If they're in the stock brokerage business or whatever, they can maybe charge fees for mergers and stuff like that. But the banks are sitting right now in a position. I think they're waking up, maybe at the top, but they're figuring out all of a sudden their head is on the chopping block, and it almost occurs to me, maybe we should just forget our legislators, because they're not protecting us, obviously.
Well, they don't even know this is going on.
No
They
clue.
hardly
They
don't
don't. They're
know.
no.
Maybe we should refocus our attention on the banks themselves.
Wow.
Everybody knows a banker, I'm sure, somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be educating
I think so.
every banker in America. Guys, if you don't stop this, we're all toast, and you're going to go down just before us.
Well, let's ask how that fits in with Carroll Quigley. Remember, Carroll Quigley wrote the book in 1966, Tragedy and Hope, and he said that the New World Order was going to come through the Bank for International Settlements, right?
Yes.
In Basel, Switzerland, which is the central bank of central bankers. So the Federal Reserve Bank of all the Western worlds, like our Federal Reserve, they go there, they meet, and they decide what they're going to
Essentially, like
do.
the fourth city state.
So I think we have to distinguish between the central banks of the various countries and the bankers
Yes.
that are at your Truist or your Wells Fargo, etc. That's or your locally owned bank, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a clear distinction we have to make, right?
It is.
For sure.
It
Okay.
is.
So don't confuse your Federal Reserve, which is a collection of 12 big banks. Those guys could stay around, but basically you're only going to have maybe 12 banks altogether, right?
Well, the central bankers want the central bank digital currency. They want to move everything over into it because they're the ones who are going to own the assets.
But the Federal Reserve is made up of a charter given to about 12 major banks.
Major banks.
So those 12 banks will basically grab up all the others, and you'll have just 12 banks that are part of a huge banking cartel that runs the Federal Reserve, and they work in our country as the Federal Reserve with other central banks meeting at the Bank for International Settlements, which is already writing papers on doing this. So what I'm trying to say is don't confuse the central planning bankers
Yes.
with your local mom and pop bank or small or medium-sized bank in your town,
And I
right?
would see not even all 12 of those banks are going to be happy with this because it really is going to be just consolidated upwards. That's how this works.
Let me read something out of our latest paper.
Is his
here.
audio loud enough, Logan? Patrick's?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Let me read about the Bank for International Settlements here. The BIS is not a treaty organization. It's not a democratic institution. It was formally created on February 27, 1930, as a limited liability incorporation under Swiss law with member central banks as shareholders. It pays dividends. It holds assets. It enjoys, listen to this, absolute immunity from Swiss jurisdiction and from every national legal system under the headquarters agreement concluded with the Swiss Federal Council in 1987. No court can compel it. No government can audit it without its consent. And they've never given consent. No treaty supersedes it, and it's operational independence. So it's operating in the world separate from any jurisdiction anywhere. They travel, as it's called, without portfolio. You can't touch them. If a representative shows up in the United States, and he has a bunch of papers in his briefcase, and it's that would big.
They have diplomatic immunity and protections, just like UN.
You can't touch them. It doesn't matter what they do. So these people, they're still there, and they're operating. They're operating, but behind closed doors, to orchestrate all this stuff that's happening right now. And my opinion is that the BIS is going to be the ultimate owner of all this tokenization nonsense when it's all done.
Yeah, we just watched that clip with the head of the BIS talking about it, and he was like, he just, like drooling and salivating over it.
What was he saying?
He was saying how the whole entire world, everything's going to be tokenized. And he kept saying, what's so great about this is we'll have control. And he kept repeating control. And I'm like, you hear what he's saying?
Yeah, exactly. No, we're not hoping for control. We have
yes,
control.
exactly.
Right. We have the technology.
Yes.
And who was it that was saying that?
The
Augustine Carstens.
The head of
the head of the.
Is that our heavier?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay,
yes,
okay. I think I actually have the quote right here. I went and looked it up.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this might be it. Here we go. Let me play this. Here we go.
Yes.
Our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash, and there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
To what cash is. We don't know when someone spends a $100 bill. But with this, we will know we'll have control. This is very important, he says. Now, this is the Bank for International Settlements, started in 1930. Carroll Quigley, a globalist who wrote this book in 1966, Tragedy and Hope. He mentored Bill Clinton at Georgetown. Bill Clinton gives him a shout out at the 1992 Democratic Convention.
Yep.
And Carroll Quigley wrote this book saying, hey, I'm all for global governance. The difference between me and my friends is they all want to keep it quiet. I think we should all be celebrating it and talking about it. And he died under what some say are suspicious circumstances with a headline, which was gave an interview entitled at one time, The Professor Who Said Too Much.
Right?
Yeah,
he was an archivist for the CFR, the Council
on Foreign Relations, a globalist. So he was a proud globalist. He just wanted to celebrate this publicly.
He didn't understand why they wanted to keep it secret.
Keep it secret, right. And he was saying that all of this is going to come through the Bank for International Settlements, 1966. So here's a guy in 2020 saying, we kind of have people spending $100. We don't know. We have to have control, right? Yeah.
And on the blockchain, remember, it's transparent, so they can see everything. And that's how they can have control.
Someone asked today to explain what is a blockchain. And basically, you described it as a block of information. So think of a paragraph. I want this paragraph. You might say, I want this block over here and this block of information and paragraphs here. And you think of it as blocks of information. And then you tie it all together in a network or a chain that can continually and forever find it and put it together. Yeah. And there's no privacy.
No privacy. It's all transparent.
Because everything is tied to it. It's literally like a chain,
and it's permanent.
And you're enslaved. So think of it as you dragging around a ball and chain that controls every aspect of your life, right?
Yes.
Is she bringing the powerful juice? I need some of that so badly. Oh, that's for them? All right. I've only had one cup today. I've only had one cup, so I can have one more. They're getting black coffee with that. I've only had one cup today, so I appreciate it. You're doing great, Lovey. Everyone say hello to Miss Melissa. Oh, you're on. Absolutely. Say hello to everybody. Yeah. All right. So there you go. You got your coffee. I'm going to get some of mine. Let's keep rolling here. We're getting a lot of questions that were being sent to us. And again, I don't want to try to upset everybody, but I'm getting so many seniors that are talking about this. With everything that's occurred over decades, and we have been stolen from as well as our ancestors. The future is bleak for us and our children and grandchildren, looking forward to the Lord's return, but want the thieves to be dealt with and the people who have been stolen from to have their land and property and funds returned. They have stolen from us when they took away the gold standard backing up the dollar, taxing Social Security payments to seniors, double taxation, of which Social Security was already on a tax on our wages earned, property taxes on our homes that we purchased with income that we paid taxes on when we earned it. Property taxes continue to increase based on what the taxing districts desire, and then the assessors assess the homes to meet the value, to meet a value that the taxing districts desire. That's what we've been talking about with Mitch Wexler for so long. Referendums, bonds, renewed again to continue taxing without public approval, and it continues to eternity. It makes me sick to see what our elderly have to deal with, and now I'm one of them. They lose their homes because they can't pay the property tax, even though their homes were paid for. They take out reverse mortgages, and their homes are stolen this way as well. I just applied for Social Security survivor benefits, and the funds are taxable as well as Medicare. Medicare is deductible from the benefits. Some seniors would have nothing left after these deductions. Many get put in nursing homes as well. Typo there, but anyway, they get put into nursing homes. Their homes taken from them, and then put on public aid. The nursing homes take what's left of their Social Security, if anything. I mean, yeah, this poor lady, she's really kind of explaining why so many people are feeling scared.
Yeah.
Guys.
Yeah.
Are they right to feel scared?
They are.
Or do you think the folks in their late 60s will probably make it through with the system that's here now?
When I signed this book,
think
I signed every one of our books. The Final Betrayal. I signed that book. I don't know if I sent it to you. What's my signature say on the first page?
Nope, didn't get
I didn't
signed.
do it. Okay. I signed. Well, I put my name on it for one thing. I say, fear not. Fear not. There's a lot of fear, and understandably so. But as Christians, we're told how many times in the Bible? At least 15 times. In
Fear not, fear not.
No, fear not, fear not, fear not. There's a reason for that.
Hundred, but
Because we should not be driven by fear. When we talk about this stuff, you almost have to isolate yourself, put your regular fleshy self over here with all your investments or whatever you have to survive, and then talk about it over here on the other end, like we're doing right now. Discussion. It's very serious at this point. The world is being turned upside down. It really is.
Where people are being set up for theft. I mean, they're being set up for massive theft of what they've earned, theft through hyperinflation, theft through taxation, property tax, federal tax, state, local tax, theft through debasement of their currency, inflation. I mean, every time you turn around, the mom and pop are being taken advantage of and stolen from.
Yes, and how many we haven't known each other for 20 years at this point, but I've been talking about the goal of the Trilateral Commission in the first place was to strip all of the resources of the world and put them under their control. All the resources of the world, put them under their control in a global common trust. That was that we identified that when even 1977. So all of these programs along the way, Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, all this was anti-property rights, taking property away from people who rightly deserved their property in the first place. But then when you consider the asset tokenization stuff and this natural asset nonsense, and consider this may be the last tango, if you will, to strip all of the assets of the world away from people.
the great taking.
The great taking.
I know this is one step. This is two steps above the great taking.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see
If
here.
that was
Thank you for the
possible.
coffee, babe. Logan, your coffee's out here if you want it. You're gonna walk from the camera and get your coffee like everybody else is doing. Let's see. Oh, look at that. He's gonna duck down and grab it and not spill it. Wow, look how limber he is. Wow.
His nickname is Simba.
Simba.
Here we go. Courtney, Mr. House. Courtney mentioned that the banks don't like tokenization. If memory serves, Chairman Powell said at the beginning of his tenure that he wanted to downsize private credit, which he has done. And as we've seen, that is starving the tech sector of funding. Also, Max Levchin, PayPal co-founder, said on CNBC about 10 or 12 years ago that tech would replace all banks. It was interesting because I remember the host got very quiet and looked astonished.
Yeah.
This is from one of our viewers, Carol Ann. Carol Ann. Is she right? Is she remembering that right? Got a bright audience. Carol Ann's a bright lady.
Yes,
This
she
is
is.
exactly what Peter Thiel and Elon Musk said when they founded PayPal. That was their proposition.
Yeah,
They was gonna
they said
take
it
the
was to
banks.
replace. It was to replace the dollar, the all payment. Yep.
You think that the Fed somebody would have been upset even then?
So is there a battle going on now between Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, who's going to tenure out, I guess. Trump's talking about firing him because I think he has another 2 years left on his ability to sit as a governor on the board, right?
I think so.
So he can't be the chairman anymore come May, but I think he can stay on the board another 2 years. And I don't think Trump wants him staying around at all.
Not at
But is this battle not so much about lowering interest rates? Because, you know, the what we're told is never the real thing. I don't think Iran is about nuclear weapons. I think Iran's had a nuclear weapon or multiple nuclear weapons for some time, according to many experts, like Dr. Peter Vincent probably used to sit at this desk before he passed away. It's never what we're told. I think it's about IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. I think it's about moving everything that direction, right to the Middle East. And now I don't know if you guys saw this over at the Jerusalem News Agency. Look at this headline. They have a new headline that I mentioned yesterday. If I can get it to pop back up. Here we go. Shekel surges to 30-year high against the dollar. Now, that's interesting, right? But the subtitle, Patrick, is what really caught my attention. The Israeli currency's symbolic 2.99 rate against the dollar is said to reflect shifting regional dynamics. Shifting regional dynamics. You and I have been saying that everything is going to move to the Middle East. All the influence, all the power, all the wealth is moving to the Middle East. And of course, we are seeing that and believing that through the lens of the Bible, which talks about a revived Roman Empire and a rebuilt Babylon, and the merchants described in Revelation 17 and 18, particularly chapter 18, what they're trading in, which is incredible riches that's enriching the world, really. The merchants of the world, right? The kings of the world, the kings of the earth. And now what do we see? The shekel is surging to a 30-year high against the dollar. And they're saying, look, it reflects a regional shift. Okay. So I don't think the whole thing in Iran is about them having nuclear weapons. I don't think this battle between President Trump and Jerome Powell is about the battle over interest rates. I think it might be about the old system, which he wants to preserve, versus the new system that President Trump wants to build. Are these two examples of where the public is being led to believe it's about Iran having nuclear weapons, about Jerome Powell not wanting to lower interest rates, but neither of those narratives that the public is buying is the real truth.
Exactly.
Am I right?
How much is he talking now about seizing the Strait of Hormuz? I don't see any talk about nuclear stockpiles anywhere. Or missiles at this point.
But the Strait
it's
of
all
Hormuz.
about it's all of a sudden the pivot was, we have to establish the traffic in the
We
strait.
have to control that space.
So what happened? The whole narrative changed all of a sudden. It's all about the strait now. Well, that fits.
It's about those global trade routes and that
That's
whole IMEC system,
Yes.
which Kushner and Witkoff admit in their Gaza plan. IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor plan, is all a bridge for the Gaza, which also includes that perhaps proposed now Ben Gurion port going through the Gaza from the Red Sea, dumping out on the other side of the Mediterranean. It's all tied together. but we're being told something different, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So again, we're fighting, as I've said over and over for weeks, we're fighting wars really for corporations, just like General Smedley Butler back in the 30s said when he wrote his book, War is a Racket. Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that battle between Powell and Trump. Is this really Trump and Powell battling the old system that our Carol Ann was writing about, that when she just emailed us here about this? Is this a battle between the old system of Jerome Powell holding on to it and the new system that Trump wants to implement, which includes the US $1, the liberty thing he's doing with his family?
I think so. So interestingly enough, there's a lot of talk about there being the new Rome, right? We hear this about from Dugin. He says how Russia is going to be the third Rome. And so there seems to be a battle for it. And interestingly, the term that they use is usufruct, which is a Roman term.
That's what we talked about with him yesterday, usufruct, which is a Roman term,
Yes.
which I find very interesting because it fits with the idea of a revived Roman Empire,
Right.
a Eurocentric world government, and the monetary system. Now, describe for those who don't know, what is usufruct? What is that?
The term usage and fruits. So fruits is like the yield bearing fruits. So that's the profits, the rewards, and then the usage. So basically it's where in ancient Rome, they had a whole policy where they were doing land reform. You wouldn't actually own the land anymore. So it was just about usage of the land. And this is, this has such a history. And it's interesting because, Brzezinski always talked about how Marxism would be the stepping stone to the technotronic era. And if you look at that, the history of the usufruct language, right? Ancient Rome. Then we had the Gracchi brothers who tried to do land reforms so they could give the land to the poorer people. Then you had Babeuf, who was like the kind of proto-communist, and he was actually a member of the Illuminati. He named himself Gracchus after the Gracchi brothers, right? So you have this whole idea of and he was much more extreme than even in ancient Rome. And then you have we were talking about the NACS, right? The NACS, part of what they were doing was something called ecosystem management services. So this was this idea of where through things like conservation easement, people might own their land, but then if they got, let's say, a tax credit, then that portion of land they wouldn't have controlling rights over. So under the guise of ecosystem management services, some company, it could even be a foreign nation, China, could buy on the New York Stock Exchange, if this had gone through, they could buy that piece of the land, and then they would have rights to, say, drill oil. But you can't drill oil on your own land because, that's hurting the environment. You're fracking or whatever you're doing.
It sounds like Agenda 21, Agenda 2030.
It is.
Whereas Tom DeWeese was saying they use the environment because rivers and streams run everywhere down to the oceans, which then impact the whole world. So it's a global problem of environmentalism that, what's happening to our environment. And thereby everyone is a stakeholder, right? So we have streams and rivers that flow to the US, come down into the oceans. Thereby you have global rules that talk about waterways and seas and the air, right?
Yep.
And these oceans, they just happen to be tied to all these rivers and streams which run through America, and they use that to then justify the global standards. Now, how is that?
And the next iteration would be the tokenization, right? So this is where, and once it goes into the asset, you might have usage of that property, but you no longer have ownership, and they can control what you can do on it, because it's kind of like if you rent an apartment from somebody, you live there, you can say it's your apartment, but you can't just build walls or take walls down or right. They have complete controlling rights.
Even paint.
Yeah,
Most
exactly.
cases they say you can't
Hang up a painting.
So you get it cleared with us.
Yeah, you have to. So let's take this back now. Because Trump is seen as anti-globalist, but yet how are the systems? I guess what I'm trying to figure out
He's
here.
anti-globalist, but he wants to be the world monarch.
Right.
Like
So I'm trying to figure out, is there a battle going on between the globalists? Is there the technocracy, the technates, the technocracy crowd, the transhumanist crowd? They are by their very nature globalist, right? So what we're really talking about is a new, not really from the 1930s, but a new kind of globalism, right? I mean, because the old globalism you could take back to the Tower of Babel, and you could certainly take it back to Freemasonry and go back a lot further than the 1930s.
Sure.
So you, in one sense, what was proposed in the 1930s by Elon Musk's grandfather and those guys, right?
Josh Haldeman.
That's all a new kind of globalism. So are you telling me that there's a battle going on between the old form of globalism and the new form of globalism?
Absolutely certain of it. And we talked about the old New World Order versus the new World Order, right? You have to have this distinction. What's going on right now is otherworldly to everything we thought before. Whatever was in your mind, and most people are stuck in this at this point. That's all the life experience. They've all everybody has some image of the world as it was. This is not the world going forward.
Well, the Bible says the Antichrist will show up and that he will change the laws and the times.
That's right.
The laws of Daniel. It says the Antichrist will change the laws and the times. It also says in Daniel that the Antichrist will have to rip out 3 of the 10 leaders, these global leaders. He'll have to rip out 3 of the 10 by the roots, and he replaces them. So you can already see in the scripture there is this battle for changing the laws, changing the times, and getting rid of leaders that don't want to go along with the Antichrist and his new system. Aren't we already seeing a battle of global change of the laws, of the times, and ripping out the old paradigm, the old ways, the old globalism? It's already started, has it not?
It has. And whatever theater is going on with Trump versus the Fed or the banks, all of that old system is based on debt, the debt-based economic system. This is over. This debt-based system is going to be over at some point, maybe really soon. If they can tokenize a whole $172 trillion in the stock market, they can tokenize anything. But tokenization itself, this is a tool of conquest. It's based on our definition. We're talking about the concept of usufruct. And this was a tool of conquest. It wasn't a tool of liberation at all. That's what they tell us. You're going to be free. You're going to have, liberated and, financial security.
It'll be so convenient,
give me a break. This is
easy.
a tool of conquest. What the Romans, ancient Rome did, whenever they conquered a territory or a country, they took all the title of the land under the emperor. And they granted usage of that land to the people who would toe the line and collect the taxes or whatever. You see no evidence of, for instance, land use even in Israel during Jesus's time. I don't think you can find anything where you own that piece of property.
Rome had control of it.
And that's right. Rome did. This was part of their conquest tactics, if you will. And the other thing we see as well, the marriage of, or the sexual union of the Roman soldiers with the local population, basically to drive the culture out and make it Roman. Well, this is one side of this.
So, but Rome had to conquer to achieve that.
They did.
So who is going to conquer America to get this done?
Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that the conquering is being done silently?
Yeah, they don't need to. It's all protocol.
It's in the
procedural.
system now. It's in the system.
The system counters that so there doesn't have to be a revolution. There doesn't have to be a change of power. It's all being done through the protocol layer. This is something I think is so important for lawyers to be paying attention to right now, especially when we get into things like Web3. As the new iteration of the web really shifts and the tokenization becomes much more interoperable and seamless, I think that lawyers need to start looking at how this protocol layer, the procedural, right? It basically vitiates our constitutional rights, our inalienable rights that are supposed to be protected, because it becomes all about usage. So you essentially enter into the agreement. It all becomes contractarian. because you enter into the agreement just by a product of using it. So your usage. So if you want to do commerce, if you want to, trade in any kind of capacity, if you want to be part of the economic system at all, your sheer usage opts you into the system, and then you can be locked out. And so I think this is something that, there are various ways that lawyers can look at this, but I think things like it's supposed to be, our personhood is what gives us our inalienable rights, right? So things like our biometric data and our neural rights, like those should be an extension of our personhood, and they should be protected. But at the moment, they're really not. And so I don't have the answers, but I think this is something lawyers should be looking at.
Yeah.
So your article describes all this at technocracy.news. Tokenization of real world assets. Here it is. Tokenization of real world assets is a tool of conquest, not liberation. It goes into the usufruct concept. But again, I want to reiterate, Rome had to conquer, okay? You're saying the system is going to be the conquering force on its own. And we're all being rolled into the new system. Right.
And people are opting into it by sheer usage.
They're opting into it by usage, but they will also opt into it out of, as James McGregor Burns said, his globalist wrote the book in 1984, The Power to Lead. He said, we can't get the people to go where we want them to go without a stupendous national and economic crisis, right? Yep. So we need some kind of economic crisis that gets people to willingly surrender to the new system.
Yep.
Right,
Yep.
Patrick?
Yep. A good old-fashioned debt collapse would just be the thing that they need right now.
Because then they're willing to take their equity and exchange it for tokens and rent back their house, for instance, right?
Yeah. Although I will say that, certainly if they need that, that's a card they can pull. But I don't know if they'll need it because they're masters of incrementalism. So what they do is they're hitting us from so many different fronts where people are slowly migrating into the system anyway. We were talking on the radio show about the school choice agenda.
Right.
One of the things that the school choice agenda has done so effectively is gotten parents who would never have ever learned how to use crypto. They now have crypto wallets, and they're learning this essentially tokenization. I mean, that's kind of what it is. You've given an allotment of these digital, coins or whatever it is. I mean, it's money right now, but it's very much transitioning them to be comfortable and conditioned to be a part of this kind of a system. That's just one example. There's so many, but I think slowly from so many different angles, they're incrementally putting everybody into this and conditioning people to opt into it. So if they need to do some sort of a debt crisis, I'm sure that's a card they can pull, but I don't know if they'll need it. I think that they're trying to hit from as many angles incrementally.
Well, what about, again, the seniors? Here's Sandy saying, please tell seniors what to do to keep our homes. Sell and take equity and buy another and keep doing this? No equity in home. Many seniors still have a mortgage till the rapture. Please help seniors. They need good advice. Thanks so much. Hugs to Dolly. Please show her sleeping more. We love Dolly and Pearl. Well, thank you, guys. Is Dolly over there sleeping, guys? Yeah, she's over there sleeping. There she is. We'll have to get a camera on Dolly at some point here. But I'm really a little shocked tonight by the volume of emails from seniors that are pretty upset right now. We saw it this afternoon in the live broadcast, right?
Yeah.
Where they were calling in or they were emailing in while I was giving out the email address saying the same thing. And some were saying, well, what about gold and silver? Now, I don't give financial advice. I give financial opinion, but I'm a big supporter of gold and silver because it's off the books, right? Particularly if you have the numismatic 1930 and older, 1933 and older, that's not tracked by law. So they're collectibles, right? And then for some, they believe you're getting money on the spot price, but you're also making money, or I shouldn't say making money, because gold and silver is not about making money. It's about preserving purchasing power. But you do see an increase potentially in the hard asset of the numismatic 1933 and older gold coins, $20 liberties, $10 liberties, because you have the increase of the spot price, but then you have an increase of the premium on the coin as those coins are shrinking in inventory. You only have so many coins that are 1933 and older that are available because FDR wanted you to turn them all in or fine you and throw you in jail. Well, some people basically told him to go kick dirt, and they kept it, right? Which is and one reason why we have some of that around today, right? And it came back into the market. So that's a limited inventory. And obviously, Economics 101 kicks in when people say, I want that numismatic because the laws say the buyer doesn't have, the seller being, in our case, Swiss America, doesn't report to the government what I just bought. They don't. So you send Swiss America $100,000, they send you $100,000 worth of numismatic coins. That's a private exchange. When you go to sell it, they also don't report to the government. That's up to you to be honest and pay your tax. So I'm a big fan of gold and silver, particularly numismatics, because of right now the privacy, right? And I don't give financial advice, as I say, I give financial opinion. But if I were some of these older people, I would be looking to get some of my assets off the books because you can then always liquidate it. You know, even if you liquidate it at a, and I wouldn't suggest you do this, but even if you liquidated it at a pawn shop or something, you can come up with cash from it. It's a known item, right? I'll give you another example, and this is what's going on with a certain level of people in economics, you know, a certain level higher up economically. And that is some of these very, very wealthy people, they buy very expensive watches, very expensive watches. And I'm talking watches that are $100,000 or more. And they buy these, right? And I had a friend I was talking to the other day, and he was like, what kind of fool would do that? You know, obviously they have more money than they have brains. And I said, well, you might say that, but if you have a net worth of $100 million, do you really think they're worried about a $100,000 watch? I said, no, number one. Number two, for some of them, it is a statement. Okay. So that's a little flamboyant and silly, but some of them, it has nothing to do with status. It has nothing to do with being showy. It is a way to diversify with something that is mobile. Because you could put on an expensive Rolex watch, which could be $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, get on an airplane, travel anywhere in the world, take that off if you had an emergency, and pretty well go anywhere. Now, you may not be able to sell it for what you paid for it, but you're going to instantly be able to generate funds. So what I'm saying is there already is existing in the world, whether it's people who buy precious metals at whatever economic level you're at, and then there are those who are buying more expensive items that they know are ways to store value that can be used as a medium of exchange. And so some of these people are doing this because they know what's coming, and they're looking for also some ways to offset hyperinflation. By the way, some of these watches, they're not making them anymore. They're making announcements now that this style of watch, this brand of watch, we're not going to be producing that anymore.
They also have
and yet they're going up in price now because there's now becoming a shortage of those.
And there's an intrinsic value in, like, if it's made out of silver, platinum, gold, diamonds.
Some of them, the melt value. That's a very good point. The melt value alone, because they're made of gold and silver. So that person is carrying on their wrist their currency, and they can travel anywhere in the world, and they still have a backup plan that's literally on their wrist. You see what I'm saying? I know maybe the audience finds that interesting. I find it interesting. Don't you? That there are very wealthy people that are thinking this way, right? But the average person can think this way too, with the right precious metals that can be purchased off the grid legally today. And how are you going to get a hold of something like that? Now the question is, if tokenization comes in and they outlaw currency, basically, what are you going to trade your gold in for? Tokens? But I think there will always be some kind of...
I think there'll always be some sort of barter system.
Exactly right. You took the words out of my mouth. Always be some kind of barter system, right?
And I think one of the things, you know, there's a lot of people talking about, like, death to the dollar. I understand the dollar's a fiat currency, and, you know, I'm not advocating a fiat currency, but it's a million times better than the new system because it's not traceable. It's not programmable.
Right.
They can't surveil you. I mean, back in the Great Depression, which is what Technocracy Inc. was a response to, there were people who hid their cash under their mattresses, and that served them because nobody could track it. and it's private. So I think there really is a tremendous value in that. And really it becomes, money is an exchange, not to sound woo-woo about it, but it's an exchange of energy, right? It's an exchange of value. So I think that regardless of where the system goes, people are very resourceful. Mm-hmm. We have a black market currently, unfortunately, that's a reality. But that's a testament, right? That's a testament to the fact that if people need to exchange, if people need to do business, they will find a way. And I think one of the things that people can do is everybody has talents. Everybody has gifts and resources and strengths. I believe all of us have diversified. It's not the same for all of us. But there are things that people can do to hone their skills that will be a useful trade, mm-hmm. regardless of where things go. And I mean, obviously, I'm thinking very extreme. But I think it's worth people thinking about. That's 100%. Why prepping. That's why people who can grow their own food, people who can build homes,
carpenters, plumbers, exactly. Electricians, because at the end of the day, our free market system has been built on work.
Exactly.
The foundation of our free market system has been the value of work. Why does gold and silver or diamonds have any value? Because they're rare. It's a store of value. It is a commodity. It's tradable, a medium of exchange. But
it also has to be mined.
Exactly. To get it, you have to have work involved, right? Mm-hmm. If there was no work involved in it, it wouldn't have any value.
This is of course the flip side of AI at this point. That's destroying work all over the world.
Mm. Yeah. And robots are going to do that, right?
I know, exactly. So when somebody like Mark Andreessen said last year that wages are necessarily going to collapse, what does that mean? Well, he says, well, I won't even say what I don't want to even go there, but he said it. And if that happens, well, that's not going to be good for Americans. I mean, we have to have sources of income. And if you have assets right now, the only reason you have any assets is because you worked for them in the first place.
Right.
You had a job, you saved, you stored up, you made investments on homes or whatever. And this is your source of any assets you have today. If your ability to make income evaporates, you can't replace those assets that you have. You'll spin them out. Eventually, you'll spin them down, and you won't have any assets left. And then either have to get a job or live on whatever you can scrape out of the system. So, for everybody who is looking at this equation, well, I have assets and then I have income. You have to balance the two, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have income, you have to spend your assets. And what do you do then when you run out? Well, if you look at it that way, we're all going to be in that boat eventually. The rich and the poor will be on the same playing field. Fear not. For a Christian, fear not. God has this figured out for us, at least us. He said, you'll never be begging bread, mm-hmm. right? He said, I dress the lilies of the field. I take care of the little birds, whatever, each one of them. Can he take care of us as well? This is basically the ultimate question for a Christian, in my opinion. Is God able to keep us through the turmoil that's going to come in the future? I think he will.
And I agree with that. And I want to propose a couple things because there are more questions coming in. What is the tipping point for all of this is the removal of the church, the rapture? In other words, I don't want to fall into the narrative that we get criticized for, is that we're all just counting to be on being raptured and therefore avoid. No, we don't know that. We don't know that. We could go through incredibly hard times like they have behind the former, Berlin Wall or the Iron Curtain or in Cuba. But you talk about what could be a tipping point for going to this. What if it were the removal of the church, right? As we see, I think in the scriptures, the case to be strongly made for that, particularly after you don't see the church mentioned again after Revelation chapter 3 until you get to about the Supper of the Lamb. What if it were the removal of millions of Christians from the planet? Now, can you imagine what that's going to do to the economy globally? And what are you going to do with all these people's assets? What are you going to do with all their homes? Because many Christians live by, rules and biblical principles, and they've been encouraged to do this by some Christian authors like Larry Burkett and others. And so you have a lot of Christians that have their homes paid for. They're debt-free, right? So all of a sudden, you're talking about trillions. Can you even imagine the dollar figure we're talking about here, Patrick?
That's right.
How are you going to how are you going to use that money? Now all of a sudden, can you see them passing legislation on the tokenization of all those empty homes that were debt free?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you make of that?
That's horrifying. That's so horrifying because the amount of power consolidation in that.
Exactly.
And I also just think on some level it's so demoralizing too because the injustice of that, right? To think.
Of course, the people that have been raptured, they're not worried about it. But any of their, of course, children and grandchildren that are left. But of course, that's going to be the least of their worries as they roll into the tribulation. But it is an evil. It is an evil thing to see how that can be used as a tipping point. And I think we sometimes underestimate, if you hold to that eschatology, how world-changing that event is going to be. And I don't think we work that into the equation enough. It is going to be such a world-changing event if you hold to that eschatology, which I think the Bible defends. You believe that, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So that's going to be a world-changing event, which brings in, of course, eventually the Antichrist, right? In this chaos. And someone just asked, how does technology used by the Antichrist to control the world survive God's hurling of judgments to the earth? What I think they're referring to is when you go through the various seals that are being opened, right? You've got all kinds of hailstorms and things happening and people are running underground. Well, isn't it interesting? The data centers, will they be damaged? But now, where are a lot of these data centers being built? Underground. Isn't that interesting? What are some of the biggest tech guys building? Bunkers, underground. And when I see that, I think to myself, are they getting demonic encouragement to go ahead and build their bunkers underground because Satan knows what's going to happen? And the Bible talks about them running underground to avoid the judgment, these earthly judgments that really mimic what we saw in Exodus with the children of Israel. And they know it's from God, right? And they're running underground. You would think that during an earthquake, and this is going on too, you wouldn't go underground, but you got hailstorms and yet they know it's the judgment of God. So they even risk going underground for an earthquake because they're so afraid of God's judgment. And of course, then they come back out after a few days and start saying, well, maybe that's not what that was, and go back to their arrogance, right? Yeah. But think about that as the person Peg is emailed in. How does all that fit in? And I think maybe these underground data centers is going to, again, Satan knows what the Antichrist system needs to be. And isn't it interesting that a lot of these data centers are already being built underground?
This is his system. You can pin it on man and say, well, man built these systems, and maybe even Christians were involved in building some of these systems. But the God of this world is creating his own system. It's always been his system forever, since creation. And what they're doing today to build wherever data centers are being built all over the world, but even especially in the Mideast right now, they found a home that they can basically expand as much as they want in the Gulf states. And all of the stuff that man has built, we should not hang on to it as Christians for sure. But what they've built is designed for one thing only in the end, and that's to serve the Antichrist during the 7-year period. All of it that's being constructed right now, the system. In fact, there's a global scholar, a guy by the name of Dr. Parag Khanna, from Singapore, who said blatantly in one of his books, in the fly of one of his books, said, well, we're building this global system without a global leader. The system is the thing. He said basically, well, he didn't know what he's saying. I don't think it was a Satanist or anything, but he said we're building the system without a global leader. Well, okay, the system is there now. And I thought even this was like in 2015, I thought to myself, well, who would be a global leader suitable to take the helm? Well, there's only one person, the Antichrist.
Isn't that what was his name? Henry Spank of the Common Market said so many years ago, the forerunner to the European Union? He said, what we need is a man of sufficient stature to hold the allegiance of the people and to lift us out of the economic morass into which we're sinking. Send us such a man, and be he God or devil, we'll receive him. Yeah. He said, we don't need another committee. We have too many committees already. What we need is a man of sufficient stature to hold the allegiance of the people and lift us out of the economic morass into which we're sinking. Send us such a man, and be he God or devil, we will receive him. I've never forgotten that quote. And I think it's from the 70s, or maybe even longer ago than that. It was Henry Spank, a prominent man in the Common Market, which I said was before the European Union. That was kind of the forerunner to that. Susan is asking tonight, how close are we to this becoming a reality from a technological standpoint, you think, Courtney?
I think that it's being built right now. So I don't know. I think it's pretty close.
5 years? 10 years?
I guess it depends on what aspect she's asking. Like the full tokenization of everything, I think is I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. At least I really hope not. But it is being built. So,
when the New York Stock Exchange says they're going to
tokenize everything,
they're going to tokenize $126 trillion into blockchain.
Yes.
Tokens. That this is real time right now.
Yeah.
They're starting the process right now.
Well, and you know what's interesting? I can't remember exactly what the technicalities of it were, but I just remember being so horrified by it. Was back in 2018, didn't Trump essentially appoint BlackRock to manage the New York Stock Exchange, right? I don't remember that there was some sort of a loophole how he did it. It wasn't formal. I mean, people might push back and say, no, he didn't actually do that. But effectively, that was the result. And I remember at the time being so horrified because that means they essentially managed the Fed. Right? That means that so if BlackRock is talking about tokenizing everything, they're now talking about putting $125 trillion of the New York Stock Exchange on token, and BlackRock is saying we're going to tokenize everything, and they already manage most of the New York Stock Exchange. Well, that doesn't leave a very pretty picture.
And the head of the BlackRock is Larry Fink, who's also the head of the World Economic Forum now.
Yes.
And a member of the Trilateral Commission.
And he's also been pretty friendly to Donald Trump in the last couple of years.
Yes, absolutely.
So think about that. The head of the BlackRock, Larry Fink, the head of now the World Economic Forum, he's also friends with Donald Trump. So you can see where they're all kind of running together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they have mutually aligned interest. So
let me reiterate that the common core, the backbone, we see the Bank for International Settlements everywhere, behind the scenes, like this video we just watched. They're part of this for sure. Then we see these members of this global elite organization that said in 1973 they were going to build a new international economic order. They said it all over the literature. That was the members of the Trilateral Commission. They're still all over this whole picture. You see them everywhere. Even the Board of Peace, all the members that Trump selected for the board of the board. I don't know how you say that. Board of directors of the board. Right? There were three members of the Trilateral Commission on that board.
It's like a third.
Almost 30%, 35% of the board was members of the Trilateral Commission. How do you pull that one off? Well, it just so happens that the president of the World Bank, this interoperates with the BIS and the international, or the IMF organization as well. The head of the president of the World Bank, AJ Banga, is a member of the Trilateral Commission as well. And he's a member of the Board of Peace. What's wrong with this picture? So we see this core of people associated
And he's
with,
on the Board of Peace, Trump's
Yes.
Board of Peace, which is basically going to be the new United Nations.
that's what
it seems
Trump
like.
said. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a rebrand.
It's run by a private individual, not the president of the United States.
It's only $1 billion a seat, though. The bargain.
We should make a collection right now. Let's buy a seat.
Yeah, right.
Maybe we can.
We'll just create some tokens and buy it.
Listen to one, I think this is a U.S. senator, because it looks like the Clarity Act is very close to having its final form.
Yeah.
Listen to this, guys.
We need U.S. guardrails, the type of guardrails that clearly delineate between commodities and securities, that clearly delineate between traditional banking and non-traditional banking. The rules of the road have to be clarified for the security of our, by the way, of our financial institutions. That they're not unimportant in this debate, obviously. We have a wonderful legacy of diverse financial institutions, from credit unions and community banks all the way to the big ones. And so we need to look out for that. But we also, though, cannot allow digital assets and digital industry to go overseas, go offshore, lose that innovative edge that is clearly an American edge if we do it right. So I think Cynthia's right on point. Time is not our friend when we get much past Easter and get deeper into this political year. So I think we need to have the right guardrails. I think one of our banking committee members says it best. We know we did the right thing when they all dislike us the same.
Yeah.
And so we have to find that middle ground.
All right, so that was a couple weeks ago, it looked like before Resurrection Weekend. But there you go. Guys, you respond to that?
Yep. This is the.
We
this is
need
the final, this is the final piece of legislation that they need at this point. Is if it passes, it may not. I realize that somebody could kill it,
Pushback.
but at this point, I think it's going to pass.
Yeah.
Let's see. What else? What do we got? Let's go back to the Iowa. We talked about that today, but I want to get into it again for television for those who missed it, because that was really shocking. A friend of mine called me this week and was talking about how he was just visiting some friends that have, I think, 4 small children down in Iowa. And he told me that this family have their kids in a Christian school that apparently they would not be able to afford as a young family to put 4 kids in a Christian school unless it was for the fact they were getting money from the state of Iowa. And I mentioned that today, and you immediately said, well, that's part of the plan. And then one of our listeners sent me an article, which I'll make reference to, but go ahead and mention, when I brought that up, you said, well, that all fits in with the school choice thing.
Yeah, so this whole purpose of school choice is to put every child on a blockchain ledger. So from, cradle to grave, they can track them, they can harvest all their data. And this was part of the World Core Curriculum, right? Robert Mueller's whole plan. And
just for those who don't remember, Robert Mueller was a former undersecretary of the United Nations, added more divisions than just about anybody, was closely tied to Alice Bailey, the occultist, the mother of the New Age. And he's the one that basically was the father of the World Core Curriculum. And that brought us, of course, America 2000 under George H., Goals 2000 under Bill Clinton. Then it was under George W., it was No Child Left Behind. Then under Obama, it was Common Core. It's the same thing.
It's all the same. Yes, or Charlotte, it would be called a communist core.
Yeah,
Communist core, yeah. But essentially, yes, it was, the World Core Curriculum was predicated on Alice Bailey's education in the New Age. And of course, Alice Bailey didn't talk about, blockchain ledgers, but essentially she did talk about it becoming a technological infrastructure and where everybody could be tracked. And of course, it was going to be like this, they called it like the machine, the cog in the machine. We had to know where the children could be placed.
Like Aldous Huxley wrote in Brave New World.
Exactly.
As I quoted this afternoon, he said that for the revolution we require, it will demand an army of managers who can assign any given individual to their proper place in society, because square pegs don't fit in round holes. They tend to have dangerous thoughts about the social system and to infect others. So this goes back to the books I was writing in the early 90s about school to work.
Yes,
School
exactly.
to work, which is really the accomplishment of the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
Merging education with industrial production.
Yep.
So now the state will assign you based on your worldview, based on your digital portfolio, because we
Yes.
know what the child believes, and we haven't been able to correct his areas of, quote, weakness. He's still holding to those biblical values, you know, his mom and dad inculcated it to him. So we can't have him become a doctor or a lawyer. We got to put him down to digging ditches or something.
Yes, exactly. And so Aldous Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley, was one of the founding members of UNESCO, wrote the mission statement, which was all about eugenics. And if you look, UNESCO has done several documents talking about how they want to put every child on a blockchain ledger. And they have done a lot of this experimentation with children in Africa already, where that's as soon as they're born, instead of a birth certificate, they essentially have a digital ID where they start to harvest all of their data. But school choice agenda now makes it so that by giving under the guise that they're giving parents money for things like being able to put them into a better school, maybe a Christian school or a private school, or give them more resources, or control the homeschools, which is largely what it's really about, because the homeschoolers that currently do have the most freedom, but they still need to make all schools government schools so that they can control them and so they can extract the data from them. And so we have all these programs like social emotional learning that are using tech ed. And of course, they've sold it to the parents that the tech ed is really just going to, we're going to collect the data from the children so that we can know how best to teach them. It's, very targeted. It's AI precision education, essentially. But what they're doing is through cybernetic feedback loops, they're extracting data from them, but they're also programming them. And they're then part of the data extraction too is that, so now everything's on a blockchain ledger, which is fully transparent. So 20 years from now, that child could be looking for a job. And in order for the parents to keep them in whatever program to keep that money, they have to attend things like wellness checks. And maybe they did a wellness check and decided that this child has ADD or OCD, or maybe he's a little paranoid. They've decided this when the child is maybe 12, and now they're 20-something trying to get a job, and they say, well, there was this wellness check, and all of that will be
On
transparent.
there.
Yes.
And what's so sad is that the government knows those homeschool students and Christian school students are the ones they don't have control of right now.
Yes.
They're the ones they're not brainwashing now. That's why people are opting out of the government schools and going to homeschooling and good Christian schools.
Yes.
And when I was in the early 90s writing these books on education and traveling and speaking for what was then the largest Christian school association in America, there was a group of them that hired me to read legislation to warn them in specific states where these Christian schools were based, well, anything that would infringe upon their independence through forced teacher licensing, right? Yep. And now, of course, we see that more and more states are wanting to force that all teachers, even those in the Christian school, have to be licensed teachers, which you say, well, why would you want to not have that? Because now you're getting control of the Christian school colleges and universities. We're not going to let those kids who graduate from this Christian college university with a teacher's degree, we're not going to honor their teacher licensure to go and teach in the public school or teach in a Christian school even, because we're now mandating all teachers must be licensed. Well, that now means you also have just effectively taken over the Christian colleges and universities, at least their teaching certifications, because now you must teach the cultural Marxism, the LGBT, the tolerance, whatever. So now you must indoctrinate the teachers, even in the Christian schools and colleges and universities. And there are colleges and universities fighting this in certain states right now. But I was hired by this collection of Christian schools in the early 90s, in the mid 90s, to watch this, to keep track of this. It was probably more toward the late 90s, to watch this, keep track of this. Well, now we know from one of our listeners sent this to us today. Look at this. We mentioned this at the end of the radio today. School choice offers opportunity for government tech platforms. This is in Iowa, okay? Yeah. But it goes down to a new digital ID program in Iowa. And as we went down through this and we talked about it at the end of radio today, and I wanted to bring it back up tonight, you were noticing that it's talking about their biometrics.
And facial recognition.
Right?
Yep.
And so it won't be long before you get the money, but you have to give over your kids' biometrics, facial recognition, get them a digital ID. And then when you have the parents appreciating the thousands of dollars in education they're getting, by the government, well, we really need you to incorporate a couple classes, right? It always starts with maybe 1 or 2 classes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then next thing you know, the private schools, the homeschoolers are using a lot of curriculum given by the state and federal government.
Yes. And now they're using AI, right? Didn't Melania do her speech? Or we're going to have Plato, the robot, is going to...
teaching the children.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, Plato is going to teach the children. But you're seeing, I think we had talked about this before, how of course, it was Plato. It's not Aristotle who's going to teach the children. But I think that it's worth noting because you're talking about like in the Christian schools as an example, and how the curriculum is being controlled by the money that's being given by the state or through these ESAs. And we see this with classical education. So many parents are putting their children into what they think are quote unquote classical education. But really, these curriculums have been gone over with a fine tooth comb and they have been steered. So they use the vernacular that may sound like Christian education, or it may sound like a truly classic Western civilization education, but it has been curated so that it is steering towards things like, humanism, which is most of what is actually being done. And I think that's why it is Plato.
So
Platonic humanism.
let me see what else we got coming in from our audience. Let's see. I guess most of them are just, making comments on how evil this is, how concerned they are, losing their autonomy, losing what they've worked their whole life for. This seems to be a very common theme among a lot of the comments coming in tonight. Let's talk about inflation. Do you anticipate massive inflation? Because right now we do have the Trump administration asking for a lot more money from the Pentagon. And many of the members of the House and the Senate are saying, well, we really want a budget. We really want to know what it's going for. And apparently right now they're not telling them so much. They're just saying we need money. And of course, the Pentagon hasn't passed an audit in, I don't think, decades, right? So and we're clearly in an inflationary cycle, and that's only going to continue. So again, at what point do we see this being used to debase the currency so that we go to another system? Here's another question I would have. Many of these banks are in trouble with derivatives, which I think Warren Buffett has called a weapon of mass destruction.
It is.
So at what point is the system manipulated in order to cause the collapse of some of these banks? We've seen, it's been reported that George Soros and some of his buddies were kind of good at bringing about economic problems in other countries based on whatever they were doing. How vulnerable are these banks to economic manipulation or pulling the pin on these weapon of mass destruction, being the derivatives that some of them are holding, which are just astronomical, I'm told. And that is, again, the linchpin for taking down some of these banks and then the consolidation to the new system. In other words, there's got to be something that's that tipping point for this consolidation, right, Patrick?
When we talk about liquidation of banks and liquidation of companies as well, that's deflation, not inflation. And deflation is more destructive than inflation. That's what we saw during the Great Depression, for instance. All the businesses went out. People went out of business. The people couldn't get their hands on money. There was no way to get a good job, and everybody shared their potatoes with their neighbors in soup lines or whatever. Deflation, put it this way, if the whole system collapses, and especially when you consider the derivative market, at this point, this derivative market might be several quadrillion dollars in size. Nobody knows for sure. But if somehow the whole thing collapsed, it would be basically the end of the dollar altogether, period. That would be a very natural solution at that point to bring in tokenization of everything, because everybody they could get everybody back on their feet again. Everybody could have a digital wallet, and hey, we'll put money in your wallet, go out, spend money, whatever. It won't be dollars, however. It'll be something else. But
You'll play tokens in your gamified society. Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about that do you think the audience needs to know about? Is there anything I haven't touched on? I mean, well, by the way, we mentioned today, which again, you blew me away with this one, that people like, you say, Doug Wilson, Pastor Doug Wilson, and Pete Hegseth and others are working on these little communities.
Highland Rim, yeah.
Highland Rim?
Which people are calling it a network state for Christian nationalists. So it's on the border of like Kentucky and Tennessee, actually. But yeah, it is essentially a network state. And so network state was, the term isn't, Balaji Srinivasan didn't create the term, but he wrote a book really codifying it. And he talks about how we're going to have the dissolution of geographical nation states in favor of ideological cyber network states.
And what's it called again? I want to look it up.
Network state. Oh, this one, Highland Rim.
Highland Rim?
Rim.
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 Yeah, RIM.
And Hegseth's involved?
He because he's member of the CREC with Doug Wilson. So yeah, I don't remember which one he goes to, but yeah, he's affiliated.
He has a home church here in this state, and then he has one in Washington, Virginia.
Right, outside of DC.
All right, here's the BaptistNews.com. Tell me if this is what this is. My father is Tennessee's unofficial welcoming committee, Virginia native, blah, blah, blah. The far right's building aligned communities while looking for a red Caesar. I'm looking for, we're just...
Yeah, the company Highland Rim Project offers individual lots with a few premium holler farms for buyers interested in unmatched seclusion with an incredible opportunity for hunting, agricultural prepping activities. A holler, an Appalachian lingo, is a very narrow valley surrounded by hills or mountains. So yeah, it's being marketed, I guess, as, for this, the manosphere.
The Highland Rim Project. There it is right there.
Yeah. Yep. So for the manosphere crew, right, which, yeah, he's is the co-founder of the American Reformer, right?
We need cities on a hill.
Yep.
He says. Oh boy.
So and of course affiliated with the new founding for Glenn Beck's Blaze Media.
Yeah.
Say that again?
Right there. Yeah. The company started by Nate Fisher, the current CEO, and Matthew Peterson, who left New Founding to go work for Glenn Beck's New Blaze. Yeah.
New foundations is another issue.
New Founding is definitely, just the name, right? The New Founding. They're trying to recreate the founding. And I don't think it's at all aligned with what the founders of the United States would have had in mind. It is a very different vision. They really do want a theocracy. So they're starting with their network states where they can have a theocratic network state, which is essentially outside the confines of the laws of the nation state. And I think people need to recognize, because people get very caught up in the whole decentralized concept, right? Oh, it's just these little enclaves. But in Balaji Srinivasan's book, he has a whole chapter where he says it's decentralized towards a re-centralized center. And now,
say that again, please.
Decentralized towards a re-centralized center. Those are his explicit
words. And when was
words.
that book written?
That was a few years ago. I don't know what. Yeah, maybe 2018.
Okay, not that old then.
Oh, look what?
It's not that old. So basically, what this is,
maybe 2012. I don't know, but it was after the seasetting project kind of failed, and so.
So what this is really 15-minute cities for conservatives, so called.
Well,
15-minute cities for reconstructionists, for
but
dominionists.
it's not just, so this one is in particular kind of a Christian nationalist.
But you could do one for Mormons. You could do one for Muslims. You could do one for
Peter Thiel has one.
technocrats. Could do one.
And they have many. Peter Thiel has his Prospera, which is in Roatan, Honduras, and the subsidiary used to be called Vitalia, which if you go to that website, it said a city where death is optional, and now they've renamed it to Infinita. And there have been all sorts of conflict and tension between the government of Honduras and this network state. But they're doing it in Greenland. They have one called Praxis in Greenland, and Trump has championed it as being a freedom city. And then they have a sister one to Praxis. Peter Thiel is involved in the Praxis one. And then they have a sister organization, another network state in California that's called Atlas. And this is a part of there's a sister organization to the Praxis in Greenland. But yeah, they have different flavors, and some of them are more autocratic, kind of technocratic, overtly. I mean, they're all technocracies because they're, they have a technological infrastructure, but they have different flavors: the libertarian, the Christian nationalist,
But what is the benefit of the technocrats for this? Why do they like it? Because it gets all the different movements to build 15-minute cities, thinking they're building freedom when they're really building their own.
Well, they get tax exemption. They don't have to. They're special economic zones, so they can do whatever they want. So, like Peter Thiel's Prospera, for example, they're doing all sorts of they call it like a longevity kind of experiment, but it's essentially transhuman experiments, biodigital convergence experiments down there that they wouldn't be able to do without, getting approval of like the FDA and pesky laws that we have here. They can just do whatever they want. It's their own, they call it like a billionaire's playground.
But for the people like the Reconstructionists, the Dominionists, the groups that are going to maybe do this, is it not getting them all excited and on board with the idea of 15-minute cities under another name? In other words, like we said earlier, wasn't it Lenin that said the best way to deal with the opposition is to lead it?
Yeah.
So why are we going to fight with these people who have come out against the World Economic Forum? They've come out against 15-minute cities. Let's just call it freedom cities. Let's tell them you can build your own, and you can build it around what your values are. As long as you're building the system plugged into the database, what do we care what they do? Right? Is that it?
You got it.
Yeah. I think so. Ultimately, what it is it's building the world brain, right? So when you talk about decentralized towards a re-centralized center, remember H.G. Wells said that the decentralization of the ganglia of information, sorry, maybe it is inflammation too, but information would be the conduit to the world brain. And back then, the information institutions were academia and the media. And today, arguably, that's the internet. It's the technology, right? It's the data centers. It's all of that become the decentralized ganglia. But that's the conduit for the world brain. So you have all these little network states. They're all harvesting the data. And eventually they can become interconnected because remember, it's decentralized towards a re-centralized center.
Right.
So I think that's really what it's about. So they're like, yeah, fine. If you want to build yours over here and yours is the Christian nationalist flavor, and then yours is the Dominion flavor, yours is the
Muslim or Mormon, whatever. They don't care.
They don't care.
But again, I go back to the fact, Patrick, that what this is doing is it is neutering the opposition. Why are you going to be opposed to 15-minute cities if we have renamed them and told you we are fine with you building your own Dominionist, Reconstructionist, Christian camp over here, your Muslim camp over here, your Mormon camp over here? We don't care.
You can go hunt in your city on the hill.
Yeah, you can go do whatever you want. We don't care because at the end of the day, what they're not going to tell you is, but at the end of the day, we still have control of you because you've just plugged into the system of which we run the system. We run the tokenization. We run the cryptocurrencies. So we don't really care if you go over here and build this. In fact, we like the idea of you going over here and build this because now we are no longer the evil World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab with his Dr. Evil persona. We now have the different groups building the 15-minute cities that they want. They're doing it for us. They're taking away the stigma. They're taking away the negative, and they're making it something good. and everybody's happy because they got what they wanted. Isn't that really, it's this mass deception to have people that were once opposed to their system building their system.
Yep.
Sounds like
And they
it to
don't
me.
care when the system is all plugged back in to the same data network, right?
Just send your data.
Here, send your data.
Send the data.
And if
No problem.
and if you go too extreme, we just turn you off.
That's
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, what's good for the goose is not. They say it's good for the gander as well. If a religious group can build a community like a network state with its own regulations and this isolation, whatever, at the same time that a Muslim group can do the same thing under the same pretenses in Texas, for instance. Is this the beginning of the Balkanization of the United States at that point? In a small way, it sounds like it. If everybody does their own thing, you end up with separate groups of people doing their own thing. But like you said, they're all going to be plugged into the same machine.
You can avoid a civil war this way. Avoid a civil war by letting people have the perception that they have broken away, but they haven't broken away because they're plugged right back into the system.
And meanwhile, they're collecting all this data on you so they can, it's like what happens with the social media. You have all these silos and they don't care about the resistance as long as they can track the resistance, because they can track that behavior. They can eventually control that behavior.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And the Muslims are going to love this, because now all of a sudden the Muslim communities are, instead of all the people that are fighting those Muslim communities now, they'll stop fighting them, because it'll be like, well, if we fight the Muslims doing it, then we're not going to be able to do it. But if the Mormons can go do it, and the Dominionists and the Reconstructionists and the Libertarians, or whatever group you're talking about, is building their own system, well, pretty quick, they've got to stop complaining about the Muslims having their system.
That's right.
So the Muslims, from their standpoint, and we know that the Muslims are all tied into this tech stuff, right? They're holding the World Government Conference in United Arab Emirates every year. So this is a great way to get
Largest voting bloc of the UN, I think, is the OIC.
wow.
Or it's one of them. Yeah.
So you can see where this takes away people criticizing all of these planned communities of the Islamists, because, well, if we criticize it, then we can't have ours. So fine, go do your thing. We're going to do our thing. You can see where what this does is it completely neuters all opposition, because they think that they have control and autonomy that they don't really have. It's kind of like a soft despotism, right? It's the appearance that you vote for your leaders. It's the appearance that you live in a free society and you elect your officials and your leaders. Well, soft despotism makes you think that, but you only get to vote for who they put up, right? And they make sure that anyone they don't like doesn't have the money to run, or they destroy them using their media friends to do it, right?
Yes.
So when you vote for Republican or Democrat, they don't care, because they control either one of those horses, right? So it's soft despotism, giving the appearance you're in control when you really are just choosing between their two candidates.
Yeah.
You use that same concept with these so-called freedom cities, which you're calling them what states?
Network states.
Network states.
Network states. And by the way, Peter Thiel himself says, well, if you don't like this state,
Yeah.
like Praxis or something, if you don't like that state, you could just change your citizenship to another network state.
And I don't want to confuse the audience. We're not talking about if you don't like Minnesota, you move to Tennessee. We're talking about if you don't like what's going on.
If you don't like Praxis, you can go to Highland Rim. If you don't like Highland Rim, go to
And these are planned communities within, and it really at some point won't be so much a problem whether it is in Minnesota or Tennessee, because you'll be able to set up your own system with your own rules to a degree.
It could be in India, could be in Europe, anywhere in the world that's a network city. If you like that network city, you can be plugged into it.
Right.
Yeah.
But
It's kind of like Amish, right? If you want to become like the Amish and live outside of all of these other beliefs, you can create your own little Amish community.
Yes.
But of course, you won't be going without electricity or anything because that's not what they're out after.
Right.
But they're, what I'm saying is they're looking for something where they're like unique and different and their own worldview, their own values, their own community, right?
Yes.
And so you're basically taking the concept of here are the Amish over here and you're updating it to the 21st century,
Yeah.
right?
You'll have to abide by all of their rules. I mean, if you join like a vegan network state and you have for dinner and have steak with some friends, you're probably not going to be allowed to, do trade
Right.
in your network state.
Look at this, what they say here. Let's see. Where do we pick up on this? Anton, now a senior fellow at Claremont, coined the title Red Caesar to refer to an authority figure he says would be halfway, as it were, between monarchy and tyranny. Others, like Christian nationalist author Stephen Wolfe, have called for a similar type of autocrat under the moniker Christian Prince. Abby Toy went a step further and posted on X, quote, basically America is going to need a Protestant Franco, end quote. He clarified that such a leader might be necessary to restore order to a nation on the verge of anarchy. All of this means new founding is about more than just funding businesses and housing developments. It's about refounding the nation from the bottom up in preparation for the arrival of this Red Caesar. Here's the proposed layout for the Bend at Cumberland River in Burkeville, Kentucky. To discover how they plan to do this, we need to travel still deeper into the darkest recesses of metaphorical holler. Claremont leaders and other conservatives are abandoning liberal California for aligned communities like the HRP, where they can wield influence on a local level. Michael Anton and Claremont President Ryan Williams both moved their families from California to a suburb in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Fisher lives in Dallas, and Abby Toy did as well until recently moved to Tennessee. Conservative Skylar Crescent, who moved from California to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, told the New York Times, quote, a lot of us share a sense that Christendom is unraveling. We need to be engaged. We need to be building, end quote. In 2020, Kreisen, Fisher, and Williams began discussing how they would establish new institutions to replace faltering ones. They decided on a fraternal community in the mode of the Masons. What? Or the Moose Lodge, which they christened the Society for American Civil Renewal. And then it goes on from there. So they're waiting on this Red Caesar. Who in God's green earth is that going to be? Sounds like the Muslims are waiting on the Mahdi. The New Agers are waiting on the Krishna, the Maitreya.
The Christ, Lord
the Christ,
Maitreya.
Right? The Christians are so-called Christian nationals are waiting on the Red Caesar. What a bunch of nuts.
Should we bring up the Dark Enlightenment now?
Yeah, I
About
think
how Curtis Yarvin says we need a monarch in America.
Yeah.
Not a president, not a Congress. We need a monarch. Like a
CEO-style
CEO.
monarch, yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, the network state, Balaji's book, it was 2022, really recent. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Haywood is also a big proponent of what he calls whoever that guy is. Haywood.
Charles Haywood?
Is that who it is?
Yes.
He calls it armed patronage networks. He believes the left seeks to exterminate white people, and if forced to engage in open warfare with the federal government, Haywood is convinced he would be a natural warlord. Williams, Haywood, and Chris all are on the SACR board of that little community they're trying to create.
Yep. Yeah, this is
BaptistNews.com reporting on this, by the way. So this isn't like some dark corner of the internet.
Yeah.
That's a group that's been around a long time,
Yeah.
Baptist News.
Yeah.
This is, but yeah, they're totally aligned.
And you're
with the
saying that
Dark
Doug
Enlightenment.
Wilson's group is into this too?
Well, yeah, he's
Yeah, this
doing
is,
it.
yeah.
He's
doing this.
Is he mentioned in
he's
this
driving
article?
this.
Yeah, he was mentioned in the
Oh yeah,
beginning.
look at that. Aligned
Yeah.
Christian, like Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Doug Wilson's.
Doug
Yeah.
Wilson. Misogynist compound in Moscow,
Of course,
Idaho.
he's going to be the one that does this because he wants to create a theocracy.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if he thinks he's going to be the leader of that, theocracy. But
Oh wow, look at this. Abbott plans to move 50 families into the Kentucky development with another Tennessee development opening in October. Pastor Andrew Eisker announced he will be planting a church in one of the HRP communities. Eisker is currently senior pastor of 4th Street Evangelical Church in Waseca, Minnesota. He graduated from Doug Wilson's ministerial training school in Idaho.
Yep.
Gosh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at this. Eisker is critical of pastors who are taught by big evangelicalism. They call it Big Eva.
Big Eva.
To be doormats as he approves the aggressive takeover of the Southern Baptist Convention by fundamentalists. So isn't this interesting?
Torba. Torba from Gab, yeah.
These guys all think they're fighting what's so bad about the Southern Baptist Convention, and there's a lot to be.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the people that are supposedly the good guys fighting the rot and corruption are plugged back in to people like Doug Wilson and these.
Who says that women are the kind of people that people come out of?
Yeah, and he says that it's basically like women need to shut up and go make sandwiches or something to that effect, right? I mean, he said some stuff that I can't repeat.
Yes,
Really?
he does. This is true. But yeah, that's how he talks about women. So when they say misogynistic, and I'm not a feminist, but he's pretty awful.
Wow. Okay, wow. This whole thing is.
But it's very aligned with the Dark Enlightenment. Like,
Okay,
this is,
get into that.
Yeah, because people like Curtis Yarvin are very supportive of these. You see, they seem like you were talking in the beginning about the unlikely partners, but they're both in favor of this. First of all, they're in favor of network states, right? Because Curtis Yarvin says that we should have a CEO-style monarch. We should not have, the country is essentially archaic. He's opposed to democracy. Not that we're a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, but he's opposed to that too, because we need to have a monarch. And he says that we need to run things like a business. So this is essentially what they're doing. And it's all very autocratic. So you think about the concept of a theocracy is very aligned with an autocracy. Somebody is in control and everybody has to be uniform. It all has to be, they all have to be aligned and follow the same rules. Otherwise, they're kicked out of it. They tend to be very much aligned.
His concept of a sovereign corporation,
Yes.
SovCorp, he called it, right?
Yes.
Where all the property in the system would be granted to the SovCorp to run
Yes.
on behalf of society,
Society,
and let
yes.
them be the usufructs, if you will, to manage or occupy the property.
Occupy the property, exactly.
Yeah.
Which comes from Nick Land, who was the one who coined the Dark Enlightenment. Nick Land had the idea of the GovCorp, but they're essentially the same
Yeah.
thing, and they're both network states.
I wrote in my article here, by the way, about when I was quoting before about the Bank for International Settlements. I said at the end of that section, the BIS is the ultimate SovCorp.
Oh yeah, I always say it's the fourth city state.
Yeah.
If you think about, we have the Vatican, the City of London, and Washington D.C., and I kind of think like the Bank of International Settlements is the
your
fourth
fourth.
city, and I think it's actually above the others in some ways.
Let me go back to this article. They're quoting a blogger named Jay Engel. Thinks Baron Trump could be the Red Caesar, while Haywood said on the new Founding podcast that Elon Musk is a possibility. Musk himself is backing J.D. Vance. Vance is certainly positioned to seize the MAGA mantle from an aging Trump, and he has ties to both Claremont Institute and the New Founding. Founding. But whatever the outcome of the 24 election, this group, New Founding, and their associates are poised to act physically, moving people into position in the Highland Rim and other planned aligned communities across the country. Isn't that something? Do you want a picture of that, Patrick?
I just did it.
You did a picture of that? So why do you find this so interesting? You had not seen this article before, right?
I haven't seen it.
Me either. I just put it into a search engine because you brought it up and look what popped up. That's the beauty of broadcasting with a computer and doing this in real time.
Yeah.
Because we all learn new stuff.
Oh,
Aren't you thankful, folks? This isn't a scripted show like you watch on most of the networks. Everything is scripted.
I've been tracking this just because the whole concept of network states is something so concerning to me. Because I really see it being heralded by a lot of people who think that they're freedom-minded. They think they're not to pick on the libertarians, but, a lot of libertarians, a lot of people who think they're championing freedom, and they're jumping onto this thinking that it is, really the resistance to technocracy when they're literally building the beast system. That's literally what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I've been tracking that. But Curtis Yarvin also is a huge proponent of Vance, right? So you see how they converge.
Yeah, well, Peter Thiel said that Yarvin was his house philosopher.
Right.
He spread this ideology to all the tech bros in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
At this point. They're pumping for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting concept.
And this is, of course, all aligned with the Reconstructionists, the Dominionists, the Seven Mountain Mandate,
Yep.
all that kind of thing, right? I mean, it's so...
Well, everybody has a slice of the pie.
Yeah, right.
That's it. It doesn't matter what you believe. We have a place for you over here. For you, other people over here, we have something over here. For your hardcore technocrats, we have something in Argentina or whatever.
Right.
And it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
Just
matter.
as long as you send us the data.
Yeah, exactly.
and here's an article.
When you're saying how they're happy to have somebody else to be building, and it's not just so they're not the evil top down, the Klaus Schwab devotees. It's also so that you're literally building the system for them. Mm-hmm. They don't have to build it all. It's an opt-in. These people it's the Highland Rim Project are building the system for them. They don't
Do you
have to
remember
do it.
when we talked about the United Nations and the language in the United Nations document that says no person left
behind? Yep.
What do we see in education? No child left behind, right?
Yep.
The concept here is make sure that everybody's in the system, somewhere in the system.
That's right.
It doesn't matter where they are, but they have to be co-opted to be part of some element of the system in order to be controlled.
Look at The Guardian had an article on this back in January of 2024, revealed far-right figures try to create Christian nationalist haven in Kentucky.
I see there's going to be an on-site broadcast. I can see that
Oh,
coming.
yeah, I know, right? We gotta go.
On-site.
Let's go check out what they're doing there.
Yeah.
A mobile team
Yes.
set out from World
Boots
War
on the
II.
ground reporting.
There's the news is covering it. Let's see what if they have a. Well, let's see. They'll probably make us run a commercial at first, but which we'll skip through it. But apparently, this is being picked up by the local news out of Nashville, WTVF. They're reporting on this thing as well. It's really interesting how so much secular media, they kind of, I don't know if they're not connecting the dots like we are, but I find this very fascinating from the standpoint, again, I think the right, again, I had the book in 2016 called The Coming Religious Reich.
Yeah.
The right is going to bring in the new Reich.
A news channel.
Absolutely. They're doing it
They're
right
doing
now.
it.
They're totally doing it.
And of course, we're going to be the problem.
Oh, yeah.
The Bible believing dispensationalists, conservative Christians and people that oppose this are going to be the problem. You know what's really interesting?
And the Jews.
And the Jews. Don't forget the
problem.
Jews.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is we can
Everything.
find ourselves being opposed to some of these people with people we never thought we would be aligned with, right?
Yeah.
I could see where some of the liberals, progressives, Marxists, are like, we don't like Patrick Wood or Courtney or House as far as their worldview, but at least they join us in being afraid of these right-wing freaks. Already you see that on certain websites where the people are leftist progressives, but they're scared to death of these people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, they are. They're nuts. They believe in their...
Historically, Brandon, in the 30s and 40s, communists and Marxists could not join the movement, the technocracy movement. They threw them out.
Yeah. So you saw that in the 30s, the communists and the transhumanist or technocrats didn't like each other anyway.
I know.
So
they hate each other.
So now I hate to say it, but you might see communists lining up with us saying, these people are trying to put in a theocracy and throw us all in jail, right?
Yeah.
You're exactly right. And I have one example of that. I won't mention any names. You know who I'm talking about. But one person who was aligned with Marxism approached me and did some stuff with me along the way, who I found out later was a Marxist, or at least he leans that way. and he was fighting technocracy flat out.
Yeah.
He saw it for what it was, and I didn't realize he was kind of into Marxism in the first place. But this is a living example of what you're talking about.
Well, it historically fits kind of the proletariat, the workers fighting the bourgeoisie, the property owners.
There's a series. It's called The Plot Against America. It came out in 2020, and I don't know if either of you saw it, but this was Winona Ryder.
No, I did not.
It was I think HBO series, and it was why am I blanking on who the opponent was? But essentially, like because of the war, like everybody was afraid of the communists, but then it essentially became a fascist state, and they were completely like the Reich. They were all against the Jews had to flee, and I mean it was people should watch it because it's kind of being played out right now. But this came out in 2020.
Look at this. This is from the Channel 5 up in Nashville. Watch this.
Gates' special report reveals the Christian nationalists who want to turn a small Middle Tennessee community into their base of operations, hoping to attract others from around the country. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rory Johnston.
And I'm Hunter Hoagland. They are a group who says they want to go back to an America before the civil rights movement. Their desire is to deport legal immigrants even if they became U.S. citizens decades ago.
And they want to put women back to where they think they belong. Our chief investigative reporter, Phil Williams, has been investigating this effort for 3 months. And Phil, you found that longtime residents didn't even know this was happening.
That is precisely the case. This has very much been developing under the radar. In many ways, the views of some of these people are not so different from the white supremacists we've seen marching down Nashville streets in the past year, although they dress up their ideas with intellectual buzzwords and call it Christian. And they hope that about 90 minutes northeast of Nashville, tiny Jackson County will welcome their controversial ideas of what it means to be an American. For the Christian nationalists setting their sights on Jackson County, Tennessee, picturesque scenes like this represent what they call Heritage America. It's a notion reflected in the Norman Rockwell images they post on social media of hardworking white people, especially white men.
We're building a town. We're building a community there.
Leading the way are podcasters Andrew Isker, a right-wing pastor from Minnesota, and CJ Engel, who recently moved to the area from Northern California.
Like all of our heroes were way more racist than we're allowed to be today.
Together, the pair host what they bill as the #1 Christian nationalist podcast in the world.
God made men to rule, period. That's the world God made. You don't like it? Take it up with him.
And here in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, Isker and Engel hope to make a new home in a place where most everybody looks like them and thinks like them.
Yes, the question is there room for like-minded Christians and patriots in Tennessee? Yes, there's an imperative for like-minded Christians to gather and fight with us. Like, we need Christian nationalism in one state. Like, that's what we need.
After first announcing a project here along the Cumberland River in southern Kentucky near the small town of Burkesville, the developers behind the plan recently announced their move into Jackson County. Here along the line with Macon County, one of the developers has bought up 500 acres in these rolling Tennessee hills. It's not clear exactly what he intends to do with all this land. But just a few minutes down that same road, just across from the Jackson County High School, a separate business entity has purchased another 100 acres that they are apparently planning to develop. And they've announced that Gainesboro, the Jackson County seat, will be the focus of their efforts to resettle like-minded people from around the country.
From what I can tell, they're Christian nationalists, and I wouldn't hesitate to say white Christian nationalists.
Pastor Kevin Riggs has been sounding the alarm about the rise of Christian nationalism in Middle Tennessee for years, including Gabrielle Hanson's unsuccessful campaign for mayor last year in affluent Franklin, Tennessee. You said it borders on Christian Sharia law.
a Christianized type of Sharia law where everybody, it doesn't matter if you're a Christian, it doesn't matter if you're an atheist, it doesn't matter if you're a Buddhist, it doesn't matter what, you're going to be forced to live by this narrow interpretation of Christian principles.
Having Christian nations on American soil, yep, that's ours too. We'll take it, right? That, like, restoring American identity, right? American, like, heritage American identity, that's good.
As Isker and Ingle see it, the only people who have a legitimate right to a homeland here in the U.S. are those so-called heritage Americans, like the ones depicted in those Norman Rockwell images from the past.
I would imagine in most of those Norman Rockwell pictures, there aren't any depictions of people who look like me.
We showed Nashville pastor Chris Williamson some of Isker and Ingle's own words, in which Ingle says his concept of heritage America affirms the domination and preeminence of European-derived peoples, their institutions, and their way of life, although he adds that his term also includes the blacks of the Old South.
According to them, if you're a descendant of slaves, you get to stay.
So they're defining my legacy, my entire legacy, really on slavery. I get to stay, even though I was brought here against my will and treated horribly through chattel slavery for nearly 250 years, but that's my heritage.
Even then, Ingle writes that his acceptance of black Americans is on the condition that they don't try to leverage their experience for the purposes of political guilt.
Wow. I mean, we could keep going on this, but this is really troubling, because I'll tell you what I fear, guys. I don't know who's behind these people, and so I'm not making a statement. I'm asking a question. How do we know that there are not groups behind this that are doing this deliberately to set up a narrative against Christians, right? Because I'm for teaching biblical worldview. I'm for talking about America's Christian history and heritage, but I wouldn't want to associate with these guys, because these guys are teaching and believing things I don't agree with largely when it comes to their dominionism, their reconstructionism, what they're talking about with, the what we're hearing here when it comes to their desire for, whiteness and dominance. I mean, I believe in one people group. The Bible says there's really one race, the human race. There's different people groups. But you could see where this would be a great narrative to try to get people to do these things and then paint this brush on everyone that they want to take out.
So you heard them talk about heritage Americans.
Yeah.
So when I was talking about the plot of America, the plot against America, it was Charles Lindbergh who won instead of.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So they call themselves America Firsters. Who else calls themselves the America Firsters? This group, the Groypers, right? The Nick Fuentes crew. It's literally the same playbook. So when you're saying they're bringing about the new Reich, I agree. That's exactly what's happening.
Well,
and this is setting the stage.
I just can't believe, frankly, I mean, I don't want to do a shameless plug because the book's not for sale anymore. It's out of print. You can get it in the vault. But I wrote this book in 2016. It's 500 some odd pages, The Coming Religious Reich.
Yeah.
And I talk about the New Apostolic Reformation, the Word of Faith, the Seven Mountain Mandate, the Reconstructionist, the Dominionist, the far right, and how it is going to be the far right that brings all this into place. And you're going to watch them go.
And they're in bed with the
We're the problem.
Yeah. And they're in bed with the technocrats. Peter Thiel has funded so much of that. He's funding a lot of this. I call
Peter
it the
Thiel
new
is
right.
running around warning about the Antichrist.
Oh, yeah. But he's busy funding the new right, or new Reich, if you will. But yeah.
What do you think the objective here is? Is it to set a narrative that does set up for the persecution of real Christians? Is it to use these so-called Christians to persecute real Christians? What's the objective here?
Well, I don't think for him that's the objective. I think for him it's much more a control power play. It's because if he can get these people to buy into things like his network states, and then it's a means of control and seizing power. So the narratives are a conduit for that, but I don't think he's thinking about. I don't think he personally is like, oh, let's use them to persecute Christians. I don't know that that's where his head is at. But I'm sure there are people who will support him in his endeavors who may have that in mind.
They say here that this is what the News Channel 5 is saying. They have celebrated images of whites-only diners in the 1950s, with Engel proclaiming that the 1960s ruined everything and defending racial discrimination. Yeah, it's called freedom of association, Engel wrote. Listen to this. And they mock historical incidents like the kidnapping and lynching of 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955. Now, I don't know how many of you know that story. That is a horrific story, what they did to that black 14-year-old boy, what the racists did to him. If any of you have not studied it, it's a horrific story. They have basically accused him of being inappropriate with some white lady, and they took the opportunity to then, of course, use that to murder the boy. I mean, it's a horrific, horrific story. I don't want Christianity in any way associated with these people. We better speak up, speak out, because this is not Christianity.
Yeah.
And you're telling me Doug Wilson is tied back in with one of these groups over here, and then Pete Hegseth, who, I mean, have you seen the video of him today?
Not today.
That's going all over. Let me show it, and then we'll wrap, because I wasn't sure we're going to cover this tonight, but it just shows to me a weirdness. Okay, this is what just took place with Pete Hegseth. Here we go. You ready, guys, in the control room?
So the prayer is CSAR 2517, and it reads, and pray with me, please. The path of the downed aviator is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who, in the name of camaraderie and duty, shepherd the lost through the valley of darkness. For he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to capture and destroy my brother. And you will know my call sign is Sandy 1 when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
Now, of course, we're going to be accused of being Russian useful idiots because you played a clip from RT. But the problem with this, guys, have we got that article up yet, guys, at Worldview Times? Go to worldviewtimes.com. I wrote an article on this. I was up very early this morning. I saw this, and it made me so angry, and a righteous indignation that this dude, Pete Hegseth, who I think he's a very immature guy. He's got serious discernment problems, promoting and hanging out with Doug Wilson. But here's the article right here. And when you guys get a chance, let's take down those banners there. We're not selling this or promoting them anymore. They turned our account off for some reason. I don't know why, so we're done promoting them. When scripture is treated like a prop, warning from Pete Hegseth's public missteps, okay? What he just quoted, by the way, there was only one line in there. There was only one line. Ezekiel 25, verse 17, okay? And I will execute vengeance upon them with furious rebukes, and they shall know that I am the Lord when I shall lay my vengeance upon them. Okay, that's the only thing of which you just heard him quoting comes from the Bible. The rest of it, I'm told, comes from that film we just saw a clip of, which is Pulp Fiction, which I've never seen that film. Okay? So, are you guys hearing this for the first time?
Yeah.
He reads, will you pray with me? And he reads that whole line that comes out of Pulp Fiction, and it sounds like scripture, but only one sentence of that whole diatribe he read actually comes from scripture. And the point I'm making in my article is that this is twisting of scripture. It makes the real Christians look bad. It's wrong. And this is really what they're really doing is using the Bible like a prop. Mm-hmm. Right?
There's a lot of that, yeah.
And then it gets worse, if you can believe it. I wrote all this in one article. I combined the two. Here is another video. This is also Pete Hegseth. This has all happened this week. Okay. The next video, and then we'll wrap, is Pete Hegseth I don't know if I have it. Guys, do you have it in the control room where Pete was talking about the Pharisees? Pete Hegseth says he was sitting in a sermon, and I guess apparently his pastor was preaching about the Pharisees. And as he sat there listening, he basically had this epiphany that this is, I think I found it, Logan, that this is the modern media today. Wait a minute. The Pharisees, these were people that thought they were righteous, but it was all external, not internal. The Lord saw their heart, right? And they were leading people into a works-based righteousness, a moralizing external behavior where their hearts were far from the Lord. They were putting these yokes on people. They were taking advantage of people. They were not only spiritually, but economically taking advantage of people. Isn't that why Jesus is turning over the tables in the temple? Because of the money situation going on there and how they were exploiting people financially for sacrifices. Okay, it was not Jesus upset because they somehow were not happy with some brilliant military strategy of some political leader. Now, I want you to notice and understand the real meaning behind what Jesus was doing with the Pharisees, who, by the way, mocked him, ridiculed him. The religious leaders of the day said he gained his power through that of Satan. Remember that? And you're telling me that that whole story in the Bible is now going to be hijacked by this. I don't know what to call this guy anymore. Pete Hegseth. I mean, this man is very immature, I believe. Spiritually immature. I think he's very immature at many, many levels. And to think that he's the Secretary of War, frankly, is scary. I think this dude's a moron. I think he is a first-class moron. It was really interesting because I, at one point, met his mom and dad a few times, sang at a wedding, went to basketball games that his dad would coach up in Forest Lake, Minnesota, when I lived up there. I was told on one game we went to that it was like Pete, little Pete, 8, 9, 10 years old, where he was out there in the court shooting hoops during some of the breaks. You know, I've known who this guy is, his family, at least his mom and dad. I never would have anticipated this guy rising to this level, but I hate to say it, I think he's a moron. Now listen to this. Knowing the biblical background of this text, watch this.
Of their time, they were there to witness, to write everything down, to report. But their hearts were hardened. Even though they witnessed a literal miracle, it didn't matter. They were only there to explain away the goodness in pursuit of their agenda. As the passage ends, the Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel against him, how to destroy him. I sat there in church and I thought, our press are just like these Pharisees. Not all of you, but the legacy Trump-hating press. Your politically motivated animus for President Trump nearly completely blinds you from the brilliance of our American warriors. The Pharisees scrutinized every good act in order to find a violation, only looking for the negative. The hardened hearts of our press are calibrated only to impugn. I would ask you to open your eyes to the goodness, the historic success of our troops, the courage of this president, and this historic moment for a deal that could end the Iranian nuclear threat, the incredible battlefield victory laid before your eyes, the not one, but two incredible rescue missions, miracles, you might say, or a locked-in blockade. Or how about historic recruiting numbers?
Okay, whatever. This guy's a moron. He just took the Bible and he just compared, did he not? Donald Trump to Jesus? Jesus being criticized by the Pharisees, and I just sat there in church and I thought, well, that's the modern day press criticizing Donald Trump and all of our success. That has nothing to do with the context of the scripture. And he drags this into the podium of a Department of War press briefing This guy makes Christians look stupid. He is, I think, using the Bible as a prop. He's embarrassing. He should be fired. Okay, again, I gave the guy a pass to be a team player and not be negative on everything and try to be positive where I can be positive. And I told you at the beginning when Trump was elected, I'll praise him when I agree. I'll disagree when I disagree. And I was like, when Pete got picked, I'm like, are you serious? This is who I said to my wife, this is the guy he's going to pick? Are you kidding? I couldn't even believe he got confirmed. I'm like, really? So I held my tongue and went along, gave the guy a chance. But my gut reaction was, this guy with all of his tattoos up and down his arms and everything else, and all of what we've heard about him in the past, and I wanted to give people a chance to change and have repentance and turn a new leaf. But I thought, this guy is a mess, in my opinion. And now we're finding out this was a pathetic choice. I personally think this guy is a moron. And I think when it all comes out, and any of you can be angry if you want, okay? But as a kid, I used to have the ability to sit at a dinner table when I was in early elementary with people my parents would invite to dinner for lunch after church. And they would leave. We didn't know these families. They'd come to church and we'd invite them over, be nice. And they would leave and I would say, I don't like that guy. Talking about the father, the husband. I don't like him. I don't know what it is. I could have been more than 7 or 8 years old. I don't like him. I don't like him at all. I can't tell you why, but I don't like him. And I can't do it all the time. I can't do that all the time. It's not some kind of, it's not some kind of magic trick. But there is, different people have different spiritual gifts. But I have had the ability over the years, not always, it's not 100%, to say, something about this doesn't sit right. And then later you find out, right? And there are different people that do that. Sometimes it's a wife that can do that and say to a husband, you better stay far away from this person, right? And the husband's like, what are you talking about? They're so nice. And the wife has a check in her spirit. It's like, I'm telling you, I don't know what it is, but you do not want to mess with this guy and get involved with this guy. Only to find out later the counsel from the wife was dead on. There are just certain people that God gives different discernments and gifts to just kind of have that ability. Yeah. And I did it with this guy. But I didn't say much. But I'm going to tell you now, guys, you may not believe me now, but you just watch and let's just wait and see what comes out and how this all plays down. But a lot of you eventually have to agree with me. This guy is a moron. This is your Secretary of War, the Secretary of Defense, running around with Doug Wilson and all the stupid things that he has done and said as Secretary of War. And this has got to be one of the dumbest, not to mention reading the scripture that is as though it sounds like it's from the Bible. Only Pulp one Fiction? Line is from Pulp Fiction. What a first-class moron. Now, you guys may not want to tie your names and faces and reputations to what I just said. So the views and opinions are those of Brennan Howell, not necessarily his guest. So say whatever you want. But no wonder the left is coming unglued. Because at least some of them have enough common sense to know this is not how the Secretary of War should be acting or talking. But you certainly shouldn't get up there and compare Donald Trump to Jesus. Because I think that's what he just did, Patrick.
He's not the only one.
No, Paula White just did it.
Paula White is one, but there's all the people that the religious people that he's gathered around promote him uniformly as Jesus. He's the Savior. I don't know how they justify this, but this is absolutely blatant in my mind right now. They're all promoting him as somehow the savior of the at least America, and this is so dangerous.
You guys, you call it the final betrayal. The final betrayal is what you're calling it.
It was,
but people think he's going to save America.
Yeah,
but you're saying we've been betrayed.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, there was also right after he was shot. Remember that a lot at Butler, like a lot of people were saying
had head wound, and recovered from the whatever.
Yeah,
they claimed that it was divine, and it's because he's our savior.
Well, I didn't think it was because of our Savior, but I did think there was some kind of providence that saved him. Because I'm like, how else could you get saved? But I never saw it as.
But that was a narrative.
That was a narrative. You're 100% right.
After that, because a lot 100%. Of people who were already kind of pitching that now they had an anchor.
Yes.
Was it God who saved him, Patrick?
Look, this
did you hear what I just asked you?
This is.
He doesn't want to go there.
Well, the Bible tells us very clearly
God raises up leaders and brings them down.
Well. Well, there will be many antichrists that go into the world. He's assuming a role that only Christ can fill. This is the concept of pseudo Christ, right? He's positioning himself as Christ.
Because the word antichrist doesn't mean against. What it means is in place of.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there'll be many, so we're not saying he's the antichrist.
That's true.
But what we're saying is that in many regards, he's setting up the system that antichrist will use, whether he knows it or not, or even intends to or not. That's what's got us all concerned. And the Bible says that when this happens, eventually the deception that's coming will be so great that even the elect will be deceived if it were possible. But guess what? Real Christians will never be deceived by a false gospel or a false Christ.
I hope
so. And that's coming yet into the future. But you can see where that deception is already being set up and how people are responding. If you think the deception that people are falling for when it comes to what we're talking about tonight and Pete Hegseth and these religious rights, people, Freudian slip. If you think the deception that people are falling for with these characters, it will be nothing compared to what they will fall for, many of them, when it comes to the Antichrist. Now, we've been in the studio all day, so you probably haven't heard this, but listen to what Donald Trump said today. Here we go.
So, the Pope could disagree with me on that, but certainly we're allowed to have that. I'm all about the gospel. I'm about it as much as anybody can be, but
I'm all about the gospel. I'm about it. What? I got to give that again.
So, the Pope could disagree with me on that, but certainly we're allowed to have that. I'm all about the gospel. I'm about it as much as anybody can be, but
about as much as anyone can be. Isn't he the one that when someone asked him what's his favorite Bible verse, he wouldn't say anything? No. And then, have you ever asked Jesus to forgive you? I just try to do better next time. Okay, I'm not mocking the president. What I'm saying is, for a guy that says he's all about the gospel, he only seems to get it right when he's reading a speech, which I appreciate him reading speeches on Resurrection Weekend and stuff that does give the gospel, but I'm not sure Donald Trump knows what the gospel is. And that doesn't make me happy. That makes me sad, because on a personal level, I've met the man. On a personal level, I like him. I find there's something about him that's a little bit likable on a personal level as a father and a grandfather, and watching him interact with my kids that day when there's just a couple of us in the room. But I can see something and see some things in some people that is commendable, right? That he loves his family. He seems to love his children. He seems to love his grandchildren. He does seem at some level to love various parts about America and want to protect the country. I can appreciate a lot about President Trump, but also say, as a discerning Christian, I don't think the man understands the Bible or the gospel, but I know a lot of Christians hear this and they love this and they hang on every word and they use it. And yet, here we are talking about a system that's being put into place that at the end of the day is going to be used to turn on those who stand for the gospel. Am I making too much of this, Patrick?
No, not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all. Yeah. This is the state of the world right now. And we're talking about the economic system. We talked about the political system. We talked about the religious system. It's all coming unraveled at this point. It really is. Just crazy. But you have to figure the God of this world understands how to set traps for people and get people into his camp along the way. He's very clever about that. So he's had thousands and thousands of years to work on it, and he's perfected the art of deception, for sure.
Look at, did he really put this out on True Social today, Logan?
Yesterday.
That is legit, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's legit. The radical left lunatics might not like this, but I think it's quite nice. President JT. I was never a very religious man, but doesn't it seem, with all these satanic, demonic, child-sacrificing monsters being exposed, that God might be playing his Trump card?
The Trump card.
I remember we joked in 2016 or whatever that Trump maybe would be the final Trump.
when the final Trump shall sound.
That was a joke.
It wasn't.
But hey, I'm not laughing now.
Well, the bottom line is we have to be very discerning, and we cannot confuse the Bible with political pragmatism. We can't confuse moralizing with biblical truth. We can't confuse raising, as I've said years ago, the flag above the cross, right? And we can't say, oh, well, we all want to have this form of America, so we're willing to go into ecumenical and spiritual enterprises to accomplish our ultimate goal. 2 Corinthians 6, verses 14 through 17, we read, don't be unequally yoked with those who are promoting the things of Satan. Don't mix the things of God with the things of Baal, Satan. Don't mix the holy with the profane. And the text says in 2 Corinthians 6, 14 through 17, if you will not, and this is not saying you can't go to dinner with your unsafe friend. It's not saying you can't have unsafe friends. It's not saying any of that. It's talking about spiritual enterprises. You don't come together, as they're about to do next month, in a prayer rally, and we're going to bring in this Catholic bishop and that Catholic cardinal, former cardinal, and Word of Faith freaks, and, Mark Driscoll, who's a real piece of work, which is announced has come out. We're not going to get all this ecumenical kumbaya together and then seek to rededicate America to God, because I have to ask, what God? What God are you serving? Which God, right? And so all that text is saying, it's not saying you can't be friends with an unbeliever. It doesn't say you can't, work with unbelievers in what Francis Schaeffer used to call as co-belligerents, fighting abortion, fighting active euthanasia. But we have to have doctrinal and scriptural markers where we say, I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm not going to come and join you in that event, as though to say we all agree theologically and doctrinally, because I don't want to confuse people. You're bringing in things that are not from God, and if I come in some kind of spiritual event with you, it's going to confuse people. Now, if you want to hold a political rally and play the national anthem and then talk about the issue, I'll be there. But as soon as you start trying to bring in scripture, twisted scripture, we're building the kingdom of God, we're going to build this in God's name, I'm sorry, I'm out, because I don't want to violate 2 Corinthians 6, 14 through 17, because here's the key part. It says, if you don't do this, enter into these spiritual enterprises with people that are blaspheming God or serving another God or another Jesus, if you don't do this, it says, then I will welcome you. And in the original text, what it means is I will bless you. So isn't this interesting? These people want to hold these prayer events with all of these religions. Many of them have a different Jesus and a different God, thinking it's going to bring God's blessing, when actually the text says it'll do the opposite. It says, if you want me to bless you or welcome you, don't mix these things together. That's all I'm saying. Amen. Let your politics be your politics, but we don't have to have some kind of biblical, spiritual kumbaya to fix some of the things that are wrong with America. Do you agree, Patrick?
Totally. Yeah, you got it. That's it. That's it.
Closing comment? Syncretism. That's right. And this is how, of course, they're going to build the one world harlot church of Revelation 17, verse 1. It should be.
And I also would encourage people, well, you should hold fast to your theological differences, not to engage in all of this infighting, because I think that becomes the conduit for dialectical synthesis. That is actually, they want people to be arguing all day long about the theology so they can come in with their syncretism. So, have respect for the differences. I'm not saying that you should merge them all, but to engage and to, exacerbate these kinds of tensions is how they achieve their dialectical synthesis, which is the syncretic one moral religion. So
here's a bookmark. I don't know if you guys saw this, from April 15th, and it was reposted by President Trump. Dear Mr. President, I have been out of the country and just returned this afternoon. This is a statement I just released to the media addressing some of the issues you have been facing this week. I do not believe President Trump would knowingly depict himself as Jesus Christ. That would certainly be inappropriate. I'm thankful the president has made it very clear that this was not at all what he thought the AI-generated image was representing. He thought it was a doctor.
This killed me.
I think what he was told was someone doctored the picture. Yeah. That's what he was told. He walked out and said, I'm a doctor.
Well, he said, and I heard it, and he was like, we heard this. He was talking about how, I'm healing people. Yeah, and the Red Cross. And I was like, how tone deaf is this? Does he know the history of the Red Cross?
What do you say now, Logan? Oh, now he's saying he didn't have anything to do with it, even though he said he posted it in the video earlier.
Yeah.
And he said he was proud of it.
Now he's saying what, Logan?
What?
Yeah, he's sending mixed messages. Really? No. I'm not a Catholic. I'm an evangelical, but I appreciate how President Trump has defended religious freedom for people of all faiths, including millions of evangelicals and Catholics in the U.S. around the world. He's the most pro-Christian, pro-life president in my lifetime. He doesn't shy away from it. I would hope the president and Pope Leo can meet at some point, and that the Pope would have the opportunity to thank the president for his efforts to protect religious liberty. Okay, so I guess he's trying to call a peace between the Pope and the president, which if I could just on this side, I'm on President Trump's side on this one. I think the Pope is a real problem. I think the last several popes have been a problem. Benedict, Francis, and this one. So I'm gonna say, President Trump, criticize the Pope all you want. I don't care. I don't know why Franklin Graham seems to be trying to get a truce between the two. I'm with Trump on this one. Call out Pope Leo all you want. I think he's a leftist, and I think the fact he comes out of Chicago is kind of interesting. The home of Barack Obama, right?
Yes.
And where did Barack Obama?
Isn't he also a Jesuit? And Jesuits aren't supposed to be popes?
No, the last one was a Jesuit.
Okay.
Yeah, the last one was the first Jesuit pope ever. But Barack Obama came out of Chicago. Barack Obama was working in the social justice division of some of the Catholic churches there, right? And he was mentored by Gregory Galuzzo, who is a former Jesuit priest, who Barack credits in the Chicago Magazine for helping him win the ground game in Iowa to beat Hillary Clinton in the primary. He threw his arm around him and credited him. I quoted in some of my books, this Jesuit, right? So now just Jesuit Gregory Galuzzo, who helped Barack Obama become president. Now you got a Catholic Pope out of Chicago who just met with David Axelrod. Logan, look it up. I don't even think David Axelrod is a Catholic, right, Logan? I don't think David Axelrod's a Catholic. Look it up, please. So why are they meeting? I can only come up with one reason. They're going to use the Barack Obama network, and Pope, he's not. He's Jewish? No, so he's not Catholic. They're going to use the Barack Obama Chicago network and Pope Leo to try to generate all this anti-Trump sentiment, and Trump doesn't seem to realize, because he's thin-skinned, he's playing into their narrative and getting this anti-Pope, anti-Catholic war going on so they can drain off all these Catholic votes before the midterms.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And Trump's walking right into it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And wasn't this all surfaced like back in 2020 too, right? That whole, the Department of Justice did that whole memo with the, because it was part of that extreme
they were saying
violent extremists.
They were saying that those who went to the Latin Mass were extremist.
Yeah.
Remember that? The FBI was?
Yeah. And I forgot who it was who said it, but yeah, and it turned, and then the rebuttal was that this was like an anti-Catholic smear.
And that was coming out of the Biden administration, where he was a Catholic.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they just replay the same playbook.
Wow. Well, here it is, folks. The final betrayal. Patrick Wood, Courtney Turner. Is it selling well?
Very well. And by the way, read that book before you read the next book.
Okay, read this book first.
I know.
And then, which I've already done. You know, I've already done and marked it up. So we've talked about it. Mine's all marked up and flagged and underlined, as you can see. See all that?
Holy mackerel.
So look at mine's all marked up. So you can see I actually read it. You see all that, guys?
Yeah.
See it?
We like that.
Yes. So there you go. And now I'm ready to read the second one by Patrick, The New Economics of Technocracy. You will own nothing. Available at technocracy.news, technocracy.news. Thank you guys for being here. You have a website you want to plug? I just did, technocracy.news, right? And what about you, Courtney, and your broadcast?
It's go to Courtney.show. So I spell my name like Courtenay, COURTENAY. Show.
And thank you guys. Yeah. And you know what, guys? I didn't plug product or anything one time tonight. So we've been going about an hour and a half now and haven't done that. 2.5 hours, I haven't done that. So here's the deal. Do you appreciate programming like this, where we're not ruled by the advertising clock and constant breaks and distractions? If you appreciate that, I hope you will support us, because I think hopefully us going for 2.5 hours now without a commercial break shows you that we're putting the content first and foremost, okay? But we do have to bring in around $40,000 a month to keep our costs of operation going. So please help us. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. I didn't know we were going to go this long, guys, but you guys are doing really well because no one's had to stop and take a potty break or anything.
I know.
But it's like, wow, House has got us chained at the desk. What can we do? We can't get out. So we'll let everybody go now. And but I do need you guys to go to worldviewfoundation.com and support us. Worldviewfoundation.com. All right, roll the music. Let's call it a night. What a great opportunity having Patrick Wood from Arizona in the studio and over from Nashville, Courtney Turner. And again, thank you guys for all your support. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. I guess we have now over 500 people already registered for our national conference coming up in October, which will include Patrick Wood. So you better get your tickets. They're free, but you have to have a ticket. Worldviewtube.com/events, worldviewtube.com/events. May God save America. Take care.
Faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Radio with Brannon House.
And welcome to the broadcast. Glad you are with us. We're going to be joined in studio today by Patrick Wood and Courtney Turner. Now, Courtney's been here before, but this is Patrick's first time in our studio, and we're glad to have both of them with us. Patrick's normally over in Arizona, but he is here with us today in the great state of Tennessee. Now, what we're going to do today, of course, is obviously talk about technocracy, transhumanism, central bank digital currency, social credit scores, AI, data centers. There's so much to talk about. As you remember, they wrote the book, The Final Betrayal, a cautionary tale, how technocracy destroyed America.